welcome to the August 20th meeting of the Portland City Council. Would you please call the roll?
Saltzman,
Here.
Novick,
Here.
Fritz,
Here.
Fish,
Here.
Hales.
Here. Good afternoon, everyone. We have a single item on the council calendar, which I will ask Carla to read in a moment. But just basic ground rules like I can iterate at the beginning of every council session. If you're here to testify on this item, there's a possibility of signing up to do so, and please exercise that and let our council clerk know if you want to speak. We actually have some invited testimony on this particular item, and those folks will be called first and given 5 minutes. I think given the number of people here, otherwise we'll probably limit individual testimony to 2 minutes each, just so we can hear everyone. On the subject of hearing everyone, we want to make sure we follow the rules of decorum in this chamber. So if you hear an opinion you agree with and want to indicate that, feel free to give them a thumbs up or a wave of the hand. And if you disagree with them, feel free to give them a thumbs down or some other polite hand gesture. But we ask that we not make vocal demonstrations in favor or against our fellow citizens' points of view in this room so that we get to hear all of them. If you are here on behalf of an organization or a registered lobbyist, make sure you disclose that because the law requires it. And with that, I think I will ask Carla to read the item and we'll begin.
Item 871, accept the private for-hire transportation innovation task force recommendations on taxis and transportation network companies' final report.
Thank you very much. I'll make a couple comments, turn it over to Commissioner in charge of transportation, Commissioner Novick, to do the same, and then we'll start calling on the folks that we have for invited testimony. Again, we'll follow that with public testimony. Appreciate the good work that the task force has done. Look forward to hearing from you this afternoon. The goals remain, I think, the same, which is give people transportation options, make sure that the system is safe, make sure the consumer is protected, provide service to people with disabilities, and create a playing field that's fair and open for competition. I hope that we're achieving all those goals, and I look forward to hearing from you and from the community about whether we are or what we need to change in order to get there from here. So again, I want to thank you, Commissioner Novick, and the task force for the report this afternoon. Look forward to hearing it. Commissioner Novick.
I also want to thank the task force. Jim Owens told me the other day that he thinks that task force members have put in combined something like 700 hours working on these issues. And that's extraordinary, particularly given that we didn't start meeting until this year. So I'm just amazed, delighted, and everlastingly grateful to the task force for all of the thought and work they have put into this process. I am going to put the cart before the horse a bit because I want to, for those people who, I could make these next comments at the end of these proceedings, but for the benefit of people who can't stay all the way through, I want to identify some issues that to me remain open. And some of these are issues where the task force has already made a recommendation or decided not to make a recommendation, but they're issues which I still want to explore. One is the issue of the level of insurance coverage. Under the pilot, we require TNCs to carry primary coverage as soon as the app is on, but before they've accepted a ride, a level of insurance which is much more than is required of a regular citizen, a non-commercial citizen, but much less than is required at all times of the taxis. Then once a ride is accepted, we require the TNCs to carry more insurance coverage than the taxis are required to have. I am not sure that we have struck the right balance there. I want to explore options for modifications to the insurance requirements. I actually recently asked the taxi companies, the TNCs say that in period one, they do not present that great of a risk to people because half the time, exactly half the time, some of the time they might be just sort of sitting at home drinking coffee with the app on. And I said to the taxi companies, maybe there's the same argument for some periods of time for taxis, that sometimes somebody's in a coffee shop waiting for a call. So could the taxi cabs develop an argument for sort of their equivalent of period one where they carry a lower level of insurance? And the taxi companies weren't particularly interested in that, so I don't want to explore that further. But I think that there might be other options to modify the insurance requirements. On surge pricing, the task force is going to recommend no limitations on pricing. I am somewhat uneasy with the idea of the possibility of surge pricing during hours when there might be no other means of transportation available, like between 2 and 6 in the morning. So I want us to think about the possibility of having limits or prohibitions on surge pricing in the wee hours. The TNCs have said that they actually don't do surge pricing there anyway, so that probably shouldn't matter very much to them, except sort of as a matter of principle. An issue of concern to me is the fact that some taxi companies purchased Wave vehicles in recent months or years in order to comply with our 20% fleet requirement. And they have argued that it's unfair to ask us to spend money on a requirement and then immediately repeal the requirement. I think that that is a legitimate fairness concern. I mean, on the one hand, government regulations change to the disadvantage of people who are investing in previous versions of those regulations all the time. So I don't think that we should always compensate people whenever they're injured by a change in regulations. But I have to say that this is an argument that kind of tears at my heartstrings a bit. So I'd like to analyze the possibility of some sort of compensation for taxi companies in that position. And I've asked the companies to identify what the level of their recent expenditures have been. Then, as you know, one of my concerns about this whole industry is that we've got most drivers classified as independent contractors, which means the companies are not contributing to Social Security, aren't providing workers' comp, aren't providing unemployment insurance, aren't paying minimum wage. I have asked both the taxi companies and the TNCs and drivers to recommend, and also, by the way, I've asked the AFL-CIO to think about what protections could the city offer by regulation to drivers that we wouldn't be preempted by state or federal law from offering. And I've received some thoughts about that, nothing that I feel is actionable yet, but I'm going to continue to explore that. And that's one of the reasons I want to continue the pilot for a while rather than adopt final regulations. Finally, I want to mention that we are going to be stepping up our game on monitoring and enforcement, particularly on operations. And specifically, I want to note that on Wave service, the TNCs, I think, have made a commitment to Wave service in Portland. They haven't made it in any other city, and they've been making progress towards compliance with Wave service requirements, but so far it hasn't been enough. And based on our recent data, a significant period of time, Wave vehicles are unavailable. So I do want to put the TNCs on notice that 24/7, citywide service is a requirement, including that requirement for Wave vehicles, and we are going to have to start assessing penalties if we don't see full compliance. And by the way, historically, we have not really tracked compliance with the taxi cabs of that requirement either. We're going to be stepping up our monitoring of that for taxi cabs as well. So those are the issues that, to me, remain open. And I will now shut up and let the task, and first hear from Jody
Mr.
Yates from
Novak?
Peabody. Yeah.
Can I just ask you just a procedural question? Because some of the issues that you've identified are issues of concern to other of your colleagues. Today, we are technically accepting a report.
Exactly.
Which sometimes gets politicized in this body, but just to put a fine point on it, a citizen group has issued a report, and we are going to accept it. And we accept it whether we agree with the recommendations or not. We accept it whether we think it's been edited correctly. We accept it generally because a citizen group has given us a report, and it's a courtesy that we extend to formally receive it. But I understand the experimental period has been extended by administrative rule 120 days. So for purposes of what you want to accomplish today, to the extent any of us have concerns along the lines that you've mentioned in those categories or others, what is the most constructive thing we can do today to build a record around those issues, and what do you anticipate as action items going forward?
I think the most constructive thing is to ask questions that you have, that you think, particularly questions which you think is really important to ask in a public forum. So I made the statement I just made precisely to address the issue you raised about when we accept a report, sometimes people get the impression that that means that that's the end of it and we are implementing all those recommendations. So I just wanted to state for the record there's some issues I wanted to continue to explore. I think that it might be useful if my colleagues sort of did the same and say, these are issues which I want to continue to explore.
And again, I just want to put a fine point on it because this has come up when we've had reports on issues ranging from the Joint Terrorist Task Force to other kinds of things. In general, it's the tradition of this body to accept reports furnished to us by citizen committees, whether individually we agree with all the recommendations or not. So as Commissioner Novick just noted, it is not a statement, a blanket acceptance of all the recommendations. It is literally transmitting it from the citizen group to the city, because we're not being asked today to vote on final rules. We're being asked today to continue to evaluate the information we're getting during this test period. And at some later date, the council will have a formal vote. Did I say that correctly, Commissioner?
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it'd probably be good for both the public and for us as we go along, for Ms. Treat and Jody and others to articulate what are the areas where the council will return to changing regulations based on the report, or where you may have the administrative authority to proceed, but council members in the community might want you to do more work. So it'd be good for that, for people to understand where some of these issues, how and when some of these issues are going to come back to council for actual legislative action. Okay, good. Thank you for that discussion. I hope that helps clarify this for everyone. Let me call on Jody Yates from PBOT to come up with a staff presentation, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Jody Yates. I'm with the Bureau of Transportation. I'm just here to provide a summary of the data that update from what we did in July. I think Mayor Hales and Commissioner Fish were absent, so I'll just give a brief summary of what happened for the May and June data for you. Let's see. We're receiving data from both the taxi cab companies and the TNCs, and the trends remain similar from May to June. And I'll give you a quick summary. The number of trips are very similar for both months, but the distribution has changed. From May to June, the taxis provided 25% less dispatched service, and the TNCs have increased by about 30%. The TNCs provide a majority of their trips on the weekends and during evening to late hours, so the 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. Both taxi cabs and TNCs are providing 24/7 service throughout the city. We are receiving trip data that shows that trips are being provided throughout the city at all hours. TNC trips are concentrated around the city center, about 75% within the 10 zip codes around the city center, and taxi cabs provide a greater number of rides in the 12 of the other 32 zip codes. If you weren't aware, there are 32 zip codes within the city. Ride durations are very similar, 12 and a half minutes for taxis and 14 minutes for TNCs. They also have similar, they're short distance. Both company formats are short distance during the evening and late night hours and longer during the commuting times. Wait times are very similar, or similar between, similar patterns. Taxi cabs were 10 minutes in May and reduced to 8 minutes in June. The TNCs remained the 5 to 6 minutes between May and June.
I'm sorry, what was that number measuring again, those times?
The
Wait
wait
times.
time. So
Oh, wait
from the
times,
time you
okay.
request a cab or a TNC to show up, 5 to 6 minutes for a TNC, and it was 10 minutes for cabs and reduced down to 8 minutes in June.
Do you happen to have handouts for us?
I did not
Have the
have,
report here in our,
But the
you have,
report-
I'm just giving a summary of the report that I think you received.
I didn't see that.
But if not, we'll provide that to you.
When we had the previous hearing, we had numbers of charts and graphs and such, which were most helpful, and
Yeah,
it's hard for me to process when you're just giving us the numbers without having them written down.
yeah, we can provide those to you.
Thank you.
Just almost done with the data.
I see some of them, yeah.
The peak wait time for both TNC and taxis are at 5 p.m. and 4 a.m. And for wave service, there were 550 wheelchair accessible vehicles rides in June. 80% were served by taxi companies and 20% by TNCs. And the average wait time for a taxi wave was 28 and a half minutes, and a TNC wave was 12 minutes. There was a request, I'm sorry.
Does the data on wait time change depending on when you make the appointment? In other words,
time of day, you mean?
if you reserve a taxi the night before to take you to the airport, does the wait time, is that different than if you call within an hour of needing service?
I'm looking at my specialist over there who did a lot of the work.
I just say anecdotally, my experience is if I schedule a car 24 hours in advance, it usually comes a little early, and so there is no wait time. But I can understand if I try to schedule a taxi, let's say an hour out, I understand that I'm now in the queue and
Correct.
competing with a lot of other folks.
It is my understanding that, do you want to come up and help answer?
But it just, we can come back to it. Just
Okay.
Well, there was a question last time about whether pre-scheduled rides are included in those numbers or not.
And that's what I'm trying to, they are not.
Not, okay.
That's what she.
So this is rides called
Oh,
for.
immediate,
I need a ride
immediate
now.
dispatch. Yes,
Yeah.
immediate dispatch.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So there was a question back in July about complaints. So for June, we had received a total of 6 complaints, one for an LPT, which is the like limousine or type of service. Taxis had 3, TNCs had 2. In July, we had 8 complaints, kind of a similar 3 on the LPT, 4 on taxi, TNC. And generally speaking, the complaint category is about driver safety or driving safely, whether they're driving with a handheld device or speeding, those types of complaints. And there was also one more question following up on Commissioner Fritz's. There was a request on how many vehicles were available between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. And Lyft reported that they had an average of 22 vehicles available during those times, and Uber reported that they had 140 was the average.
So those are averages. Could I see the chart over the course of the weeks as to what's the lowest and the highest number of cars they had available during those hours?
I received that for Lyft. I'll have to look back and see if I have that for Uber. Yeah.
One of the good things about this hearing is that we have another one coming up in October.
That was my final point, so
Yeah.
thank you. And that will be bringing a full report to you guys on October 7th about with 120 days of data. So
And if we could possibly have that report a week ahead of time, that would be very helpful.
we'll do.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on my data summary, or?
Just, no question, but I wanted to ask Mayor and Commissioner Novick. We have Terry Williams here from the Revenue Office, and I had some questions about business license fee compliance, and I don't want to make her wait till the end of the hearing. Could she come up at this point and just give us a quick update on that?
Assuming she's ready to do that.
She's
you
ready.
wanna-
She's always ready.
Generally, that's been the case with her. Thank you, Jody. Thanks very much.
So yes, if you could just update us on business license compliance.
Sure, I can do that. One of the things that I did to try to answer this question, since I was given an idea that you were going to be asking, was I did look at our new business list that we generate on a monthly basis and looked at 3 categories of NAICS codes, or that's a national code that identifies a business type. That would include taxi, private for hire, drivers where they would be selecting for registration. They included other services, and I only know in other services that I've gotten some additional information about what that looks like. Taxi service, and then we added a new one, private for hire transportation. So beginning in March, it was very small. We had like maybe 10 with that. In April, that increased to 462 registrations. In May, that increased to 519 registrations. In June, to 738 registrations, and then July, 865. So that's over 2,500 new registrations. Now that, I don't know who that was for. That could be a taxi cab driver, that could be a TNC driver, that could be a limited passenger transportation driver. But that's a significant increase in registrations with the business taxes.
And that was under the private for hire category?
Either other services that gave some indication that they were a driver based on a business name or something, taxi service, or private for hire transportation service. So
So your sense is,
we've gotten a lot of
People are complying.
registrations. And I also can tell you anecdotally that our phones have been ringing for folks registering online, wanting assistance, wanting to get their certificate of compliance so that they can complete the process.
Terry, can I piggyback off that and just ask you, what tools do we have to verify that the folks that are advertising on the internet platforms are only people that, that have obtained their business license.
I don't know what the platforms are using for information that they have to advertise, but if they were to include their business license tax account number, that would tell you that they've registered. So they have that number.
Let me flip it around. Have
Okay.
Uber and Lyft confirmed with you that 100% of the people that have access to their platform have in fact demonstrated that they're licensed?
I'm not in contact with Uber or Lyft. That's all going through PBOT. But I understand that they cannot drive until they've got their registration with us. And so that's why I know the drivers have been very insistent upon getting that printed certificate of compliance to show that they have registered.
How often do the taxi companies pay their business like income tax?
The taxi companies pay on an annual basis based on their fiscal year end. So generally, if you've got a calendar December year end, you're going to have the tax return that's due on April 15th of every year. If you're not ready to file it by then you can get an extension of time to file, which would be October 15th. So
Do most of them run on the calendar year rather than on the fiscal year?
most individuals are going to be on a calendar year. If you're a corporation, you've got some choices in your fiscal year end. Other than that, unless you selected it, you can be a business that has one, it would be December, yes.
So I'm asking about the existing taxi cab companies. Do all of them use the calendar year, or do they have a fiscal year that might have ended in June 30th?
I don't know off the top of my head which ones have what fiscal year they could have.
If you could check, please, because one of the things I'm interested in is the loss in business income tax revenue to the city
Okay.
compared with last year. So if there are any that file based on the fiscal year ending in June 30th, we would be able to look at their income for this past year and compare it with the previous year to see what the impact both on their income and consequently on ours would be. Similarly, if there are any by the time we get to October whose fiscal year ends in September,
Okay.
I'm trying to gauge how much lost, with Airbnb, we were getting income, so that was more. With this, it seems likely that we're going to lose a significant amount of revenue, and I'm interested to try to find out how much.
Okay, we can do an analysis in an overall potential sense because individual financial data is confidential. So we can only do perhaps a percentage change or something like that.
Right.
Okay.
But I'm assuming that most of the part-time Uber and Lyft drivers are not going to reach the $50,000 income threshold to pay us any tax at all.
It would depend upon if that driver also had a business license tax because of another business that they had, then that would be combined and it might put it over. So it's really hard to say.
So if they were self-employed altogether.
Right, a consultant or did something else or whatever, then the combined could put it over and therefore have to report.
So it's not per business, it's not
sorry.
per license, it's per individual.
No, it's per individual and how you file your taxes. So if you file a joint return and you have a rental income, you have a consulting business that you file on your Schedule C, and then became a driver, that would all be on one tax return and one filing. So all of those gross receipts could be over the $50,000, and therefore you would pay based on that.
Do we give these newly registered drivers that information? Are they aware of those rules?
Can't we send them a welcome kit? We have information on our page, but we haven't sent out special notices to say, hey, you have to file. We do that in January of every year before filing to let them know that they have a tax obligation in that and they have to file a return.
So if they had previously had a business license for, say, having a rental property, would they have to get another one for driving for Uber and Lyft?
No, they would use the same account number that they had for that rental property or that other business.
Okay. So we might think about at the end of this calendar year, including in your packet that goes out, particularly to these newly registered TNC drivers, information letting them know that they may have a tax obligation that they didn't have before.
Yes, we can certainly do that.
You want to add some things?
Just a
please?
quick comment about the business licensing confirmation. We did do a specific audit around business licenses, and we audited about 30% of the drivers, and we found over 99% compliance, and only one case where we had to ask for the driver to be removed from the platform.
But that's based on the information that the companies gave us, right? We don't know if there were other
No, we-
drivers.
We were able to confirm the driver, the business license number on our own.
Right, but that was based on the identification of the driver given to you by the companies. There may be other drivers out there that they haven't reported to us, and therefore we don't know that whether they got a license or not.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Let's move on to the task force itself and ask Mike Greenfield and Jim Owens to come up, and along with other task force members, as you see fit. So. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Greenfield. I'm the chair of the task force, and members of our task force include Joe Vanderveer, and with the others, please raise your hand. And we've certainly been meeting frequently, as Commissioner Novick suggested, but I understand that among venues to get sympathy for being in long meetings, this may be not a good one. And I think Jim now has,
Oh, there's PowerPoint. All right. There we go.
So I'm going to be very brief and just touch on process. And in your introductory remarks, Mr. Mayor, you already spoke to the charge of the group. A reminder that in phase one, you asked us to focus on mandated criteria, insurance inspections, background checks for TNCs and taxis, essentially a short-term fix. And in phase two, you asked us to take a comprehensive view of the entire private for hire transportation program, address issues that we didn't have an opportunity to do so in phase one, and to reconsider the issues that we did address. I don't think I need to run through the principles again. Again, they've been articulated already in your opening remarks, and they'll be touched upon as we explain some of the recommendations. In terms of the process, we have had to date 13 task force meetings, and in the second phase, we broke up into 3 subcommittees, given the breadth of issues we were addressing. And in those subcommittees, we invited the active participation of the taxi companies and TNC companies, drivers, accessible service advocates and providers and experts, and Travel Portland. And it made a big difference to have those folks at the table working with us to develop recommendations. And as Commissioner Novick noted, we're close to 700 hours of volunteer service. We walked in today with 670 hours. Depending on how long this goes today, we'll get there. And just very briefly, the scope of the recommendations that are in front of you. We are addressing taxis and TNCs. We are not forwarding at this point in time recommendations regarding the LPTs, limited passenger transportation, the limousines, town cars, shuttles, pedicabs, horse-drawn carriages. We will be back to you in September with recommendations on that aspect of the private for hire transportation program. And again, we had 3 subcommittees. We had one on operational considerations, we had one on accessibility considerations, and one on market and program considerations. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our chair.
thank you. I'd like to speak to 2 or 3 issues that I think brought us the most attention, some of which Commissioner Novick has referred to, characterize generally what we've done, and then Joan, the Vice Chair, will go through the specifics. Let me talk about data. Prior to the pilot period, there was really not a collection of data that would be useful for comparison purposes. Probably sometime in the future, after you have approved some final regulatory structure, there will be some very useful data. The data that we now have is a slice of information which may be useful for general kinds of conclusions, but in advance of the eruption of the volcano near Pompeii, you probably could have gotten a pretty good view of what that city was like. And later on, you probably could get another good view. If you took gathered data during the eruption, it probably wouldn't be that useful. And this is a pretty big eruption in the TNC and the transportation and taxi venue. And so I'd be careful about getting down to the micro conclusions from this particular slice of data, because it's right in the middle of a big change that's going on. Certainly in the dynamic entrepreneurial and technical environment that we're living in, the city of Portland can't maintain a regulatory structure that is static. Updating the regulatory structure doesn't require, I think, a change in the policy objectives of the council. The task force is recommending a regulatory structure that reflects your charge to the task force and the policy priorities you articulated when we talked with you in April. Briefly, insurance. Insurance, we spend a lot of time on, and it certainly is a cost of doing business, and it is coverage for potential injured parties. We got as close to parity as we could in the current insurance market. In our recommendations, you'll find that we are recommending that you leave the latitude for PBOT to continue to examine the insurance market and work toward more parity as more insurance products become available. We also, after a lot of anecdotal testimony, made pretty clear that the taxis and TNCs would have to be the primary insurers in all three of the time categories. And we are recommending that you insist that paper copies of insurance certificates from the companies also be carried in the car.
Can I just jump in on that one
Yes.
point? It's my understanding now that, that in fact, in practice, the commercial insurance is not the primary insurance. And it may be that the personal automobile insurance is the primary, and with the commercial insurance as the backup. Am I correct on that?
It isn't, I don't think it's as clear as that. It certainly wasn't to the task force, but what we're recommending is that the insurance, the commercial insurance be the primary insurance in all three periods.
And I think it's helpful at this point, like if you just very succinctly and plainly explain why having the commercial insurance be the primary insurance is in the best interest of the consumer.
Well, it is, I think in the event that there's an accident, we heard a lot of testimony about actual accidents during the pilot period, and a lot of confusion on the part of the drivers about which insurance policy should be primary and where to make the claim. If it's crystal clear to drivers who it is that they pass the claim on to, that will expedite settlement of the claim.
And so I'm not an expert on insurance law, but if you spend the first year arguing about who's primary and secondary, which policy does or doesn't apply, whether there's been a breach of any policy, and on, what happens is the person that we're hoping to compensate for their injuries is left in limbo.
Yes.
So having clarity about
That's right.
who's primarily responsible ensures that the consumer or the victim in an accident is compensated more quickly, and there's some consistency in coverage.
Exactly, and so that's why we're recommending that in the regulatory structure, you make clear that the primary insurance is from the company, not the personal insurance.
And since I think you're going to find broad agreement here on that point, why, in your judgment, if we're going to make the commercial insurance primary, why not also just mandate the same level of insurance at each of the different stages?
We heard information that due to the two different business models, that's not available, given how those distinct business models operate. I don't understand it really much better than that. And so what we've suggested is that when and if that becomes available, that PBOT be given the authority to bring that into parity.
I'm going to defer to Commissioner Fritz on this broader subject because it's something she's passionate about. But
Sure.
I am just going to offer you a homey metaphor. If you have a small business and you come in at 7 to set up for the 9 o'clock opening, we typically don't view 7 to 9 as someone not being involved in a commercial activity. And it seems that there's a certain common sense view on this, that the moment you are in any way involved in a commercial activity, it's harder to justify distinction in terms of behavior, and particularly hard to justify if there's a victim, if there's someone who's been harmed in stage 1 versus 2 or 3. So Commissioner Fitz feels very strongly about that, and I will join her in those concerns, but I just want to preview that point.
I find it really interesting that you were told that the insurance is not available. You can buy insurance for anything. David Beckham had his right leg insured. So it's not credible that you can't buy insurance for that period. The taxi companies have it covered whether they're sitting in a coffee shop or not. Why did you find that credible?
We didn't question the credibility of it. What we did was to say that your administrators in PBOT can sort that out, and if it's possible to do it, that they should do it.
And I am assuming that you would support the council if we say, we don't care how you do it, just do it. You need to be at the commercial level, that would be something the task force would support.
I would support the council in any way it chooses to act.
Thank you very much.
Very diplomatic.
Chair Greenfield, I do want to ask the director, do you think that there's an argument or a strong argument for having different levels of insurance in period 1 versus 2 and 3?
Speaking for myself, no.
Yeah, and I think what you said earlier about the beauty of a bright line on primary insurance, that the commercial insurance is primary, I think there is a certain elegance in having consistency along, from beginning to end in terms of insurance coverage. And I have no doubt that it is within our authority to mandate both.
And I should say that very recently I had a conversation with some representatives of the insurance industry, and I asked them, would it be possible for people to buy insurance at higher levels for period 1 than they are getting now for the TNCs? And they said that they thought it should be possible, although obviously they knew the TNCs wouldn't like it. But that's based on a conversation with 2 representatives of the insurance industry.
Thank you, sir.
I think insurance companies are anxious, particularly with large potential customers, to offer the products that they're required to have.
Okay.
Joe Vanderveer will give a more complete discussion on the wheelchair accessible vehicle topic. What we've done is to, rather than have an implicit subsidy for those vehicles, so if you have a company that has 50 vehicles and you give a wave ride, the other 49 vehicles are subsidizing that. What we've done is suggest a more explicit subsidy, which collects a per ride charge and then explicitly subsidizes those rides, which then is an encouragement to give good service rather than a sort of a disincentive to give good service. And we worked closely with Nicole, Joe, and other members of the Accessibility Committee, and we use the Lewis and Clark study metrics for setting standards, and then suggested the explicit subsidy idea. On the status of drivers, drivers as independent contractors predates the arrival of TNCs into Oregon. That was the case for most companies prior to their arrival. On the advice of the city attorney, we recognize the issues within the authority of the BOLI director. However, we've recommended that in the absence of BOLI action, the city pursue options for obligating taxis and TNCs to pay for benefits such as work-related disability insurance.
Chairman, as a practical matter, isn't it likely that the first time this is going to be tested is when someone either asserts a claim or exercises a right claiming to be an employee, and some administrative agency has to resolve that question? Like, for example, a group of people get together and say, we want to organize. We're employees. We want the protections of the National Labor Relations Act. Or someone brings a claim under some statute that provides a benefit to employees. And somewhere along the line, someone's going to have to determine whether they're employees or independent contractors.
In my experience, government plays catch-up with the private sector. And so what we've got now is either an employee or a contractor based on a model that is, decades old. And so now government, in my opinion, has to catch up with the new reality, the sharing economy, the enthusiasm of employers to define workers as contract workers. And so I think this is not certainly isolated to Portland, but I think on a national level, at some juncture, government will catch up to the new reality and perhaps have some sort of modified category.
I think it is worth noting, although we're getting ahead of ourselves in terms of a later subject, under federal law, and particularly under the Americans with Disabilities Act, it does not matter whether you're classified as an independent contractor or an employee. There is coverage under that federal law.
Right.
So it's often specific to the regulation or the law, but at some point, an administrative body is going to decide this, and I suspect, my own guess is it'll happen the minute a handful of people decide they want to try to organize or exercise any federal or state right, and then someone is going to have to decide the question of whether they're employees or independent contractors.
There is always an ignition point, you're right. So that ends my portion,
Okay.
unless there's
Mr.
another
Vanderveer
question.
next. Joe?
Joan Plank is next.
Oh, sorry, Joan, go ahead, please.
Commissioners, Mr. Mayor. Mine's going to be pretty brief. Mike covered some of our areas. I know you have the full report in front of you. One of the areas that the task force is recommending, making recommendations, has to do with caps. We are recommending that there be no caps on the number of drivers or the number of vehicles permitted to operate. And I think from some of the data, albeit only a couple of months, there is a desire for more service in the city of Portland. To our knowledge, no jurisdiction has a cap in effect on the number of TNCs authorized to operate, and we didn't find a rational basis to do so. We also felt that if TNCs weren't going to have a cap, then cabs shouldn't have a cap. So,
Did you, as part of that discussion, did you have any thoughts about the effects on climate change of having more people driving around?
One of the issues that we discussed had to do with just environmental impacts in general, and we had some limited information, some information from some city staff that basically said we just don't know enough about what the environmental impacts are. We're going to have to watch it over time. It's going to have to be monitored. We made some recommendations that the city might want to partner with PSU in the future to try to determine if there are issues that need to be addressed.
So we probably should do that as if we adopt a future ordinance, we should start then, right? Because otherwise we wouldn't be able to see over time.
Right, our recommendation was that the city staff try to gather data
And contract with PSU sooner rather
and
than later.
suggested that they might want to contract
Yeah.
with PSU or
Thank you.
another entity.
Good question. That data collection's not already underway, right, on the environmental issue?
The city has limited data on, I think, effects of environmental impacts of vehicles. I mean, we all know that vehicles do make a difference, and more vehicles make a difference, less vehicles make a difference. I think some of the issues that we don't know is maybe there will be fewer vehicles if more people are using taxis and TNCs. Maybe they won't be driving their cars. Some of the TNCs offer more than one person in a vehicle. I mean, so there's just a lot of unknowns until this plays out that we don't have all the information yet.
And Commissioner, I should tell you, I asked the Oregon Environmental Council this question, and they said at this point, they just don't think that we know. I mean, it could be that there's fewer trips because people who would have driven to work and then driven back took transit in because they knew they could get an Uber ride back. It could be that people are taking Uber trips that otherwise would be transit trips. So it's not clear at this point what the impact is, and people around the world, I think, are trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I think since we're aiming to be innovative, we should set up a study that will find out that information.
Right. One of the other areas that we are, key features of our recommendations are that the administrative responsibility for the licensing and bringing drivers into the system be shifted from the city to the private sector. With the big increase in the size of the market and what we don't want to see is a huge new bureaucracy that's processing a bunch of paper. We think it's time to shift the responsibility for the cost of permitting from the public to the private sector. City resources need to be committed to the enhanced compliance monitoring, training, and enforcement, not administering permits.
And what would happen to the staff that are currently doing permits?
Our recommendation is that they be used or that that their duties shift towards the compliance monitoring and enforcement actions that need to be taken, and helping the taxis and TNCs meet the necessary regulations. So they would shift from kind of pushing paper or administrative to more of an active management of the program.
So I'll be interested, Commissioner, to, at the next hearing, to find out a financial assessment of whether that would require changing classifications, labor impacts, because, staff have a job description of doing a certain amount of something and also skills to do a certain amount of something. To ask them to do something different may involve some labor costs. So I think we should look into that.
And we certainly understand that, but we also, we think that we think that staffing is an important component of making this, this pilot and ultimately what you decide to undertake successful, that the proper staffing is very important. That I think I speak for the task force, that we believe that some of the, there just wasn't enough staff to take care of everything before in terms of the way the program was run, and so things didn't get done. They did the absolute best they could, but it needs to be staffed appropriately.
Right, so again, that's going to be a general fund impact, particularly of concern to me since we won't have the taxes coming in as well.
Actually, the model that's being recommended is that the TNCs, through whatever fees they pay for drivers or vehicles or whatever the final assessment is, will cover the cost of the program. So my understanding is general fund is not the hit, and I don't know, are any of the staff shaking their heads behind me?
So are you recommending then a significant increase in the amount that we would charge the TNCs for being able to have their platform operative?
We haven't seen any numbers yet in terms of what it's going to take to administer the program effectively and efficiently.
But that is part of your recommendation,
and-
that should be borne by the TNCs?
Yes, and I assume, just from my experience in these kinds of businesses before, that the industry generally likes to have things run well, and that they're generally supportive, within reason, of paying the fees needed to have a successful program.
Because am I remembering correctly that we just charged them $20,000 for this pilot?
I couldn't tell you what the current fees are, I'm
That's
sorry.
the number that stuck in my head, which is clearly inadequate. So I will be interested to know how much the pilot has cost us in terms of staff time.
All right, let's turn to Mr. Vanderveer and try to keep,
Actually-
Joan, unless you're, I'm sorry, Joan, am I cutting you off, or are you finished?
No, I think the rest of it's been covered.
Okay.
Commissioner, I actually just do want to note that the specific language of the recommendation of the task force is utilize a sliding scale, cost recovery-based approach, ensuring adequate and consistent funding to implement all aspects of the private for hire transportation program, which includes the cost of monitoring and enforcement.
Okay, Mr. Vanderveer.
Right. I'm Joe Vanderveer. Is this thing on?
It will be.
Will be? Okay.
There you go.
All right, there we go. I'm Joe Vanderveer, and I'm with the Commission on Disability, and I've been involved in this process since the beginning of Phase 2, representing our commission. And I just want to say that our chair will be speaking later, and she'll speak to the recommendations that involve our commission going forward with this issue in the long term. But I'll talk about the task force recommendation and the process that got to it. When I started this, I came in and I replaced another commissioner, and I was skeptical about where this was going to go and how it was going to go as far as accessibility went. And I was pleasantly surprised. It turned out very good. Pretty much everything that I thought should be in this is in it, and so that's a very good thing. In particular, I liked it. I'm happy to see that there's a switch from fleet quota to access time, because I think that's going to be a much more meaningful metric to use, and it's going to get us where we need to go. No pun intended. However, that's going to take a lot of enforcement effort and a lot of monitoring effort, and so that's one thing that really needs to happen. The incentivizing of wave service with the reimbursement from a surcharge fund is another great idea. That's a huge disincentive to the companies to provide the service in an equitable manner. The better training and communication of drivers, both for the taxis and the TNCs, is a very useful or very needed recommendation. Yeah, uh, effective yet, right, good penalties. I'm not sure how to put that. I think that the penalty system that we've set up for non-compliance is very thorough, and it's effective yet not draconian in nature. And so I think that will be good. Let's see, and then we put in several recommendations for different tweaks to the accessibility of vehicles, and so parameters on those vehicles, payment systems in the cabs, things like that, methods of communication between drivers and riders and those kind of things. And so that's all very important to effective service for people with disabilities. Like I said, effective enforcement is key here. So really need to make sure that happens and that data is collected and that all of the data that we suggest is collected on the accessibility issues, because without any of those pieces, it will be difficult to assess where we're at and keep things going on the right track. And so I'm happy to say that I think service has gotten better for wheelchair users in particular. There's more ways available. As you saw in Tara's presentation, there's still a disparity. Certainly half an hour is 26 minutes for a cab is kind of a long time. So that needs to improve, but the TNCs are doing a good job. They need to build their capacity a bit, but they do a good job on the time. And so I'm happy with the way things are going. And our commission heard this issue at our last commission meeting, and we support the recommendation going forward.
Thank you. Questions?
Can I
Joe?
follow up two questions off of that? The first is, in the report at page 3, it refers to the Portland Equal Access Plan concept, and it says, we, the committee, find PEEP to be an incomplete and potentially punitive approach. But it doesn't quite explain why. Could any of you just explain generally why you came to that, how you came to that conclusion?
Want to go?
Well, incomplete in that the access time focus is a good element. That's a good thing. However, the PEEP, as I understood it, I came in after that discussion pretty much. That plan kind of called for market forces to determine what happened, and there to be extreme punitive measures for noncompliance or failure to comply. And I think that's where the incomplete comes in, and that we felt that there should be more, it shouldn't be quite so draconian, and that there should be some subsidy of waive service by the city, by the system, as opposed to forcing the companies to do or die. And so.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you. And my second question, we all seem to agree on the goals, which is a fully accessible system and an equalization to the extent practicable of wait times. But we've also learned, the data that we were given earlier says about 75% of the TNC rides are in the central part of the city. And we've also heard from TNC representatives that those are the most profitable rides. So do we have a concern that over time, low-income, disabled riders outside the central core are not going to get an adequate level of service?
Yeah, I would say yes, that is a concern for sure. The distribution of waves is a big issue, and so the further out you are, the longer you'll wait. I believe we at least talked about having a different access time based on location.
Yes, we did. And that concern was raised, and there are recommendations on accessible services being available 24/7 citywide. Needs to be monitored very carefully, at all hours of the day.
So I guess
May comment.
that leads to maybe a related question, which is the statute that we're all citing to, 16.40.270, minimum standards for service, talks about service citywide, but it doesn't define what that means. And isn't the next step here to actually put some content behind that?
I think that's right. I think your first question, I think the explicit subsidy will make the economic difference a little less paramount in the mind of the providers. That's the sort of carrot part of the equation. The stick part of the equation is, it's not optional.
Right, and I think that's the point, because for example, someone recently took one of the apps, I don't have it on my phone, I've
Right.
never used it, and showed me the wait times within the central city, but as you migrated out, the app finally just said, no cars available. And I think that's exactly what we want to prevent, that we just have a system where it's separate and unequal, and we have a whole category of potential customers who happen to be low income, that i.e. more likely to be dispersed from the central core and in need of an accessible vehicle.
Well, in a moment, I'll speak to enforcement, but we have to make it less profitable not to follow that rule.
There you go.
In fact, why don't you go ahead and proceed to talk about the implementation issues, and then we'll call on the first of our other panels.
When you adopt some set of regulations, when you adopt a regulatory structure, that's one of three important parts of dealing with this issue. The second element is ensuring that the city can measure industry compliance with the regulatory standards. In other words, we've said, here's how we want you to do it, and we have to be able, through the data we collect and the initiatives we take, to compare the performance to the standard. And the third element is to have the courage, administratively and politically, when it comes time to sanction companies for noncompliance. Educating companies and drivers, measuring compliance, imposing sanctions represents a workload. There is a workload associated with that. PBOT must come to you with proposals for sufficient staffing and funding to accomplish that workload, along with assessments on the industry to pay for the enforcement. Without staffing and funding, this policy structure and the objectives you're pursuing will fail. Without your approval of enforcement efforts sufficient to make compliance the most profitable option for taxis and T&C companies, whatever you finally approve will be meaningless. You have to have the courage, administratively and politically, to convince the industry that it is more profitable to comply with the standards you establish than to not follow the rules. And I say this as the previous director of many regulatory functions at the state level. No administrative person who gets appointed to be tough in enforcement can be any tougher than the elected official who appointed them. So I'm probably making that too clear. We're providing you our best collective thinking and input on the input we received. We appreciate the input from the taxis and T&C folks who sat on our subcommittees, and we really appreciate the exceptional support from PBOT staff, city attorney, commissioner's office, and your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
One last question. The last time we had a big hearing that I attended, we talked a little bit about the terms of service agreements. The boilerplate that you, by just checking online, you've agreed to the terms. And we learned that there was a lot of terms that are inconsistent with Oregon law, and they are written more for a national audience than for a local audience. Any updates you can share with us in terms of the TNCs tailoring their service agreements to actually comply with Oregon law?
I don't have any, but, we'll watch with interest while the city staff make it clear.
Okay.
Commissioner, we
We'll see.
didn't revisit that in phase two.
Right, so I'll just make a note that I think a sign of good faith during this trial period is actually adapting and updating the terms of service agreements so that they are consistent with Oregon law, and that consumer is not being asked to sign on to something that has terms inconsistent with our law, which inevitably just breeds confusion and litigation.
Good.
And as I think I said to one of the representatives at a subcommittee meeting who raised, well, this is our business plan. I said, you have a choice between sticking with the business plan and doing business here.
Well, I want to thank you all very much for all the hours and effort. Along with Commissioner Novick and the rest of us, we appreciate it when citizens step up and volunteer for these kinds of roles, and we thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you for taking the initiative.
Thank you. Okay, we have a panel. I want to start calling some invited testimony. I'd like to start with Steve Entler from Radio Cab on behalf of the Transportation Fairness Alliance. Come on up, please, Steve. Afternoon.
As you said, my name is Steve Entler. I'm the general manager at Radio Cab and also here representing the Transportation Fairness Alliance today. Every branded taxi company in Portland abides by to regulations imposed by the City of Portland to uphold three public obligations: 24/7 service, full city coverage, and wave service. When first mandated, these pillars of service didn't originally fit into our business model, but we follow them, and quite frankly, it's a good policy. Uber and Lyft will assure, promise, and cajole that they too are providing these legal obligations to the public, but they're not. They don't consistently provide them anywhere across the globe, so why would it be any different here in Portland? It isn't. The original purpose of the task force, the public was told, was to ascertain if Uber would be a fit in Portland. It quickly morphed into a question of how Uber would fit into Portland, or rather, how can we modify Portland's regulatory scheme for providing transportation services so that it appeases Uber. We've heard it claimed that Portland is a model for how it is dealing with Uber. Pardon me, but Portland is actually a model for how Uber makes its way into a market and gets everything at once. The California-based taxi companies have convinced you that they do not need to be held to the same regulations that branded taxi companies do. You are even extending the so-called trial period by 120 days to allow them to dig deeper into this market. Uber has long contended that it is not a transportation company, but a technology company, and therefore should not be regulated by the city's taxi code. That was its premise when it entered into Portland last year, blatantly refusing to apply for a taxi company permit. However, its desire to operate here was stronger than its basic premise, so it agreed to enter into the task force process. However, Uber still insisted that it was fundamentally different from traditional branded taxi companies. It insisted that it needed special regulations as a so-called TNC. We in Portland's traditional taxi companies objected vociferously and demanded that any regulations specifically designed for Uber be designed to create a level playing field, and declared our motto as same rides, same rules. We have long argued that no matter what Uber calls itself, its only difference is that it operates unbranded taxis. Uber states that its unbranded taxi drivers are independent contractors, but so are most of Portland's branded vehicle drivers. Uber says its unbranded taxi drivers own their own cars. Well, so do most of Portland's taxi drivers. Uber says its unbranded taxis are dispatched by a smartphone app. Well, so are many of the city-branded taxis. Most of us even have our own apps. Like the unbranded taxi drivers, branded taxi drivers are paid through smartphone apps, but branded taxi drivers also accept cash customers, street hails, and stand fares. Incidentally, it's our understanding that Uber and Lyft are not supposed to take cash customers, street hails, or wait on taxi stands as a way of leveling the playing field. But guess what? There are numerous documented incidents in which Uber and Lyft drivers are blatantly disregarding these regulations. By the way, who's watching them anyway? And why is any of this important? Because the city had decided years ago that the taxi industry had a crucial role to play in Portland's transportation scheme. A public need existed for transporting citizens without their own cars, including citizens with disabilities, those who live outside the central core, and those who need short, economical rides. All of this required a system of branded companies that had a 24-hour dispatch and could provide transportation for all. In order to make these requirements financially possible, a limit was placed on the number of vehicle permits. Although the system was not perfect, it did provide the required transportation services. Then came Uber and Lyft, their army of lobbyists, and the task force. The city eliminated the cap, resulting in severe economic blow to the branded taxi industry, especially the smaller companies, not to mention drastic reductions in branded taxi cab drivers' incomes, large number of which are immigrants. So the question before the City Council now are how to maintain those needed transportation services to citizens with disabilities, the elderly, those who live in the fringes of their city, those with need for short rides, and those who need transportation at odd hours of the night. What we in the branded taxi industry maintain is that the obligation to the public must be shared equally between the branded and unbranded taxis. All companies providing transportation services in the city must be required to step up to the plate with more than lofty goals or idle promises. So far, we have not seen Uber or Lyft actually provide more than token wave service. All too often, requests for vehicles are responded to by no vehicles available message showing up on the smartphone screens. How is that serving the public? Additionally, a huge need, which you've already identified, exists to adequately protect passengers and innocent third parties who may become involved in accidents. The branded taxi industry, even the smallest companies, provide commercial liability insurance coverage 24 hours a day. We pay for the coverage for our independent contractors. The unbranded multi-billion-dollar companies need to do the same. Passing this responsibility off to their drivers is not a responsible option, either for these companies or for the city regulators. Portland's branded taxi industry has been diligent in trying to help the transition to a system that regulates both branded and unbranded taxi companies, and we offer our technical expertise, the value of our experience, and the time and effort it will take to make the system work so that all citizens can obtain the transportation services they need and deserve. We still hold out hope that the city will establish a level playing field for all market players. Is anyone listening to us? We're making some pretty important points. I thank you for allowing me to comment. If you have any questions you'd like to ask.
Thank you. Any questions at this point?
Mr. Chandler, yeah, I had two questions. One is, although you argue it's not being sufficiently enforced, and we can try to address that, by law, the TNCs are not allowed to accept street hails. They're not allowed to line up at taxi stands, and that traditional taxis are. What percentage of your business do you think comes from street hails and from taxi stands?
Well, you kind of asked me that in our meeting early this week, and I said I can only look at it from radio cabs aspect. And our company has a kind of a different model than most of the rest of the cab companies, in that I would say probably 80 to 90% of our business comes through our dispatch system. And any of you that drive around, take a look at what's sitting on cab stands or hotel stands and stuff, will see that most of the time it's some other cab company that's sitting there. It's not very often you see a radio cab. Same thing applies out at the airport. Very few of our cabs are in the on-demand line. But that being said, it probably had a pretty large effect on most of the cab drivers, and it'll be different for individual drivers depending on the shifts that they typically work. You can't add 2,500 vehicles to the streets of Portland without having a huge effect on the average cab driver's income.
On the effect, that's the other question I had. At one point, you said that you thought that Radio Cab had lost something like 6 to 8% of its business since the advent of the pilot, and Broadway said that it had lost something like 30 to 40%. And I was puzzled as to why there'd be such a huge discrepancy in the impact of the two companies. Can you give me any thoughts on that?
Well, and I went over that too. I said a lot of it has to do with our business model. We market for our drivers, and most of it comes through the dispatch system. And the other thing is, you were asking at the last meeting a specific month, and I was going by dispatch data, and which is trip counts. I can't tell you how much each one of those trips is worth, but that was a specific time during the month of May, which is right after the pilot project started. And a lot of those additional TNC drivers weren't on the street at that time. So I think I gave a quote of about 6 to 8% difference. Now it's down more, I'm sure. I didn't bring the numbers with me, but it's probably more like about 15 or 20%.
I have a question, sir. Actually, first to Steve. Steve, is the last taxi company that we permitted, was that Green Cab?
I think it was EcoCab.
Excuse me, EcoCab.
Yeah.
It is a green cab, but an EcoCab. Okay. So
In a different way.
believe that's the last one that went through the gauntlet and got a permit before we before we entered into this pilot period. So my question to you, sir, is there a way to quantify the difference in the costs that a taxi company incurs under the then existing rules before the pilot, and then assuming they had been permitted during the pilot period?
I'm not sure I fully understand that question, but I actually would like to bring up something that's a little bit more pertinent to my company right now, which is what do we do about our annual permit, which comes up here in about a month and a half. Now, Radio Cab has 155 Portland permitted cabs, and we pay at a rate of $600 per vehicle plus a $3,000 per annum company permit for 155 vehicles. I just heard testimony that 2,500 additional drivers and vehicles had been added, and that comes out to about $1.5 million, which they paid $20,000 for. Something's a little bit wrong, and there needs to be an adjustment.
So my question may not
Yeah.
appear pertinent, but there's
Yeah.
method to the madness. Let me go back to
Okay,
it.
go ahead.
Commissioner Novick earlier said he wants to take a look at the question of what was the cost incurred by companies complying with the 20% rule.
Oh, yeah,
And
I was going
therefore,
to, yeah.
And I share he and I share this concern. People who followed one set of rules and incurred the cost of complying with those regulations versus the new, fairly unregulated environment and the cost of compliance.
Right.
And I'm curious, in addition to the 20% rule, is there a way to quantify the difference in costs under the old rules, the new rules for traditional taxi companies?
I would have a difficult time with that. The wheelchair accessible vehicle difference might be a little easier to delineate.
Flag that
yeah,
one. But
yeah.
let me
Yeah.
make it as an open-ended question. Is there, as I'm trying to lead the witness, even though I may not be perceived.
Go ahead.
It may not be seen as pertinent. I would be interested
What do
beyond.
you want him to say?
Beyond the wheelchair accessible vehicle question,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be interested to know what other costs would EcoCab or anyone else have incurred under the old rules that they would not have had to incur under the new rules, since I think there's an inequity about changing the rules after you've established them for one class of providers, and then new rules for everyone else. So
Okay.
I'm inviting any additional information in the future that you have for us beyond the 20%
Right.
rule.
First of all, there's very little change for us. The regulations for the cab industry remain functionally the same. There's a few little tidbits here and there where they've allowed different kind of training and different kind of background checks. It was up to the companies, but 90-some-odd% of the code still remains intact. And the average, if you're going to compare one industry against the other, it's pretty easy to put just a car on, do nothing, and you got a smartphone. And the cost for a cab and all the ingredients go for a cab company are astronomically different. Yeah.
So Commissioner Novick, for companies whose annual permit is coming up, will they be required to pay it or what?
I think the answer is yes. And the question is whether we adjust the permit fees that we're charging the TNCs. However, if somebody has a suggestion as to how we can make a very quick change to the current rules, I'm willing to listen to it.
Well, it does, and I do think I was correct in 20,000, right, was the,
It's 20,000 per company, maybe, I'm not
company,
sure.
yes.
But that unlimited amount of vehicles and drivers, and I wasn't sure what that number was until I just heard it.
well, and I'm understanding that this extension is already happening. That's not a question before the council today, but I am worried about the costs to the city and the taxpayers for continuing this experiment without proper reimbursement. So could we consider charging the TNCs more for the additional trial period?
Let's see. Let me ask.
Let's put that question on the table and hear from the rest of our.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah,
let's get the.
I just want to inquire with the lawyers as to what we have the legal authority to do immediately. But I think that, I mean, what we're moving to is a model of full cost recovery, so the permit fees should be related to that. So as soon as we can come up with a formula that meets those goals, the better.
So maybe
Just-
as we proceed, we could flag questions for either staff or the task force.
Well, the principle that I thought we were doing this pilot on was that it should be roughly the same for the different types of organizations. And I remember that we waived some kind of individual driver permit fees for the taxi drivers for the course of this. So it doesn't seem fair to charge one company a whole load more than the others.
Okay, good point. Thank you. Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you for your listening.
Okay, let me call the next couple of invited speakers, Brooke Steger and Annabelle Chang, representing Transportation Network Companies. Come on up. Good afternoon. Whoever would like to go first.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, members of the council and mayor. I am Annabelle Chang, Lyft's West Coast Public Policy Manager, and we wanted to thank the Private for Hire Innovation Task Force, the staff at PBOT, and your staff for working on this issue for so many months. During this pilot period, thousands of Portland residents have been connected through TNC apps, providing mobility options to many people who did not have those options before. So we really appreciated the time and the effort that the task force put into this, and we appreciate again in the phase 2 of the task force the ability to participate and provide some of our perspective from the industry side. So I just want to address some of the outstanding issues that we'd like to discuss. I think we've definitively raised the bar in terms of wave access for residents across the city of Portland, but there's still some remaining questions on how can we best serve the community. So I just wanted to say that now that we're operating in the city and seeing firsthand the logistical hurdles of wave access, I wanted to kind of discuss how that actually works. So for us to be in the pilot, we have partnered up with local wave providers, Ride Connection and Wapato Shores. Now, these relationships are based on hourly fees. So what does that mean? So it means that in order for us to have availability of wave cars, you actually pay for the hour that they are available, which is actually the most meaningful way for someone to actually get a ride, because what that means is when they turn on their app, they'll have a wave vehicle able to connect with them. So that is different. It's not a 20% fleet percentage. It is actually about having that vehicle available. But then again, the cost is very significant. And so the question is, how do we make this meaningful so that people are actually connected from rides to the providers? So we were really pleased to see that the task force came up with the accessibility fund. We also agree with the Commission on Disability that is the right idea, and those alternatives are going in a positive direction that I think will improve wave access for residents across the city. We also want to talk briefly about insurance. So we strongly agree with the task force's recommendations. These insurance standards were set nationally, and they have been adopted by states all over the country. And we believe that they provide adequate and have proven to provide adequate safety for not only residents and passengers and drivers. So to be crystal clear, we are primary in the period 1 phase. So for additional feedback, we've also given Commissioner Novick written feedback on street hails, trade dress, and mechanic certifications, and late night availability and pricing. And we're happy to talk about that further as well. So thank you again for your time.
Just to be clear, is Lyft primary in periods 1, 2, and 3?
Yes, we are. All TNCs must be primary in period 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, and in addition, what is your view about whether it's commercially reasonable for us to require that there be $1 million liability coverage in period 1, 2, and 3?
So I think that's a good question that has been discussed for probably a year or more. And so the conclusion of those discussions was that the 5,130 primary in period 1 was adequate, and that $1 billion in 2 and 3 provided also adequate. Now, I just want to be very clear that periods 2 and 3, we have double the insurance limits of taxis in the city of Portland.
But is there any question in your mind that we have the authority to regulate those minimums?
No, there's no question in my mind that that is possible.
And to the extent that someone is injured in period 1 or potentially very seriously injured, as a company, what would you say to them if they needed coverage that exceeded the $50,000 limits?
So it obviously depends on a case-by-case basis.
All right, well, let's say it inadvertently, unfortunately, someone dies. I mean, there are going to be instances where we're operating under actuarial rolls of the dice. What would your company say if someone was grievously injured and there wasn't adequate insurance coverage in the period 1? Because that's really, we're putting the human face on this. It can
Yeah,
get
no,
very-
absolutely.
it can get very abstract.
And I think those are very important questions. You know, it even comes down to what are the limits for personal insurance, right, for a driver. So I think those are similar questions. I mean, we'd be happy to discuss it further.
Do you have any reason to believe that the marketplace would not provide up to $1 million of liability coverage in period 1 for Lyft?
We have not seen it available at this point.
And have you sought it? Have you asked?
Of course we have.
When you say you haven't seen it available, what kind of outreach have you done to reputable commercial insurance companies?
That question has certainly been asked.
Okay, but Ms. Chang, I do think, I mean, to Commissioner Fish's point, I mean, have you called up an insurance company and said, we want to buy $500,000 or $1 million worth of insurance for you from period 1? Will you give it to us at a price that we can negotiate? And if they said, no, we refuse to sell you that level of insurance at that price?
So to be clear, that obviously is a private business negotiation, but that question has certainly been asked. So I'm saying that those discussions have taken place.
Colleagues,
Yes.
if we can require 50,000, we can require 500,000. I think this is an academic discussion, and the council needs to decide what is most safe for the citizens of Portland.
Good point. Ms. Steger.
Thank you so much for having us today. I just wanted to applaud the task force for all of their hard work. As you guys have pointed out, they've put in an extreme amount of hours. I had the privilege of sitting on a number of the subcommittees and saw all of the hard work and thought that they have put into this, so I definitely want to applaud them for being amazing citizens of Portland, and also for you for all of the thought and work that you've put into this. I realize it's been a bit of a long road, and it continues, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. Overall, we feel that this program has been a success. We've seen over 2,000 small businesses start on our platform and provided over 400,000 rides in the city of Portland. We believe that that has directly contributed to taking drunk drivers off the road, to helping take people out of their personal vehicles and into public transportation onto their bikes. We also launched Uber Pedal here in Portland a few months back. And we look forward to continuing to be a part of that fabric here in the city of Portland. We've also been deeply committed to the compliance efforts for the pilot program. Every driver has to be inspected by an ASE or a Blue Ribbon certified mechanic. We've only found 2 mechanics that we've been able to partner with so far in the city, but have stayed true to that. And every time a driver is inspected, they are required to sign up for that business license. They are given a first aid kit and a fire extinguisher and a hands-free device. We have stuck to those very, very readily. And as the City of Portland employee pointed out, every driver does have to have a business license before being activated on our program, as well as have their vehicle inspected and a background check and MVR check passed. We also do provide primary insurance in periods 1, 2, and 3, as Annabelle pointed out. I think Portland has also taught us a lot of valuable lessons. We just opened up our permanent office here in Portland and have 5 full-time employees and look forward to growing that. We've also seen a ton of partnerships we've actually partnered with almost 100 small businesses here in Portland, connected neighborhoods, partnered with nonprofits, and look forward to continuing those partnerships. And that's really why we put teams on the ground and why that's so important to us. We look forward to primary regulations in October. and look forward to working with you on changes to the existing pilot program. One of the biggest and most systemic problems in Portland, we believe, was the wheelchair accessibility here in the city. And I'm not saying that we have been perfect in that solution. There's still a ton of room for improvement. But we have partnered with First Transit. We are offering service. There are gaps in that service that need to be filled, and we are working with them to fill those gaps. They have committed to providing us with 24/7 service. And again, as Annabelle pointed out, those are hourly. We do pay those drivers hourly, so we are committing a significant amount of funds to ensure that that happens. Furthermore, Portland is the first city in the entire world where Uber has launched P2P wheelchair accessible option. This was not easy. It took a lot of time. We had to deal with there were special insurance negotiations that had to happen. We actually, even though it's outside of the regulations, we put forth additional inspections for those vehicles and additional training in person for those drivers. And so there's only 4 currently on the platform. But we look forward to that growing, and it's truly momentous, and I applaud the team for so much hard work that they put into making this happen. And this is a first for Uber in the entire world. So it's a huge deal, and we're very, very proud of it, and we look forward to growing that. I don't think it's an end-to-end solution, but I do think it's a step in the right direction, and we do support the task force's recommendations on creating a fund, and we look forward to working with them and making sure that those funds are used to actually solve the problem and move this forward. Lastly, we're just very excited to continue to work with you, to find a permanent home, and to continue to grow the team, support the thousands of small businesses we already are, and take tens of thousands of riders home safely.
So when you, both of you mentioned you pay your wheelchair accessible providers an hourly fee. So I'm not sure I understand that. Are you saying you pay them, I don't know, take one driver, one wave driver, you pay a 24-hour fee to that company to make sure there's at least one driver available in that 24-hour period?
That's correct. So currently, we are reliant, obviously, on the supply that currently exists in a market. And so we pay we partner with First Transit. We pay that company. They arrange the drivers. Those drivers work for or partner with First Transit. And First Transit is our partner. And we pay an hourly fee to that company in order to ensure those drivers are on the road.
So you pay the fee prospectively. It's not something they invoice for you afterwards and say, we actually, I don't know, provided 8 hours of the day, but sorry, we couldn't cover the other 12 or 14 hours.
We have a contract with them that outlines we work with them to negotiate a contract, outline which hours they can be on and agree to be on. And I will say it has been difficult for them to create a 24/7 solution. It's something that they've been working very hard on and have committed to delivering. But in the contract, we negotiate which hours they will be on, which hours they can potentially be on. A lot of these vehicles, especially during the day, for example, are used for non-emergency medical transportation and non-emergency medical transportation trips. And so it's very important that there is supply available for that as well. So it's navigating the path for this to find supply for the for-hire transportation.
So sorry.
Well, I was going to switch gears to just having drivers available 24 hours, 24/7. I mean, I guess that's been another issue. I've heard, this thing, you get something on your iPhone says, sorry, nobody's available. So do you have incentives to have drivers serve those odd hours? I mean, do you pay them incentive pay or a higher, or maybe take less of their cut, anything like that?
Are you referring to waive or?
No, I'm not referring to wave. I'm just referring to general 24/7 coverage for anybody that desires to use Uber or Lyft.
So from Uber's perspective, I think that's something we explored in cities early on, but now we are able to meet and ensure that because of the amount of partners that we have on the platform and because of the dynamic pricing, we are able to see and ensure that there are vehicles on the road at all times. As Peabot pointed out, there are trips being completed 24 hours a day. We see 24/7 coverage here. We also supplied some numbers to the city to show that, yes, there are drivers on the platform between those hours of 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. Furthermore, dynamic pricing actually encourages that. It is that exact incentive that you're speaking to. So when dynamic pricing is available and on, drivers can see this, they can access that information, and they know that supply is essentially lower than the demand is, and it encourages drivers to come on the road and complete trips.
You don't currently do surge pricing?
There is currently surge pricing, and
There is.
that's correct. We did not launch with that, but when you're trying to do that supply and demand balance equation, when you first launch a city, obviously there's a ton of latent demand in a city, and so you want to wait and ensure that you can build up supply to a point that is adequate to meet that. And we obviously have an algorithm that runs in the background that determines what that supply and demand equilibrium is, and that was turned on, I believe, 2 months ago.
Ms. Steger, I can't remember if it was you or some other representative of the company. It was my understanding that in the middle of the night, you haven't been using surge pricing because you haven't found it necessary. So between like 2 and 6 in the morning, you haven't been using surge pricing.
That is not to my knowledge. If you don't see dynamic pricing enabled when you open the app at 2 a.m. or 2 p.m., that means that there's an adequate balance of supply and demand.
But you don't know whether it's true, what I was told before, that you generally haven't been having dynamic pricing in the middle of the night.
That is not something that we have ever put into effect.
What do you mean? You haven't ever put into effect surge pricing in the middle of the night?
We've never, so we don't control, it's either dynamic pricing is either on or it's off. So if it's on, then if supply is lower than demand, then dynamic pricing will go into effect automatically. I don't have the ability to say, okay, surge pricing is turned on, but not between these hours.
Okay, but in practice, do you have data on whether you've been using surge pricing in the middle of the night? Because what I was told is that in practice you had not.
I am not 100% sure. I would say typically we see dynamic pricing go into effect at the end of a large event, Friday night around 11 or 12 p.m. It is atypical that you will see dynamic pricing in effect between the hours of 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. That's across the board here in Portland as well as in Seattle.
I have a number of questions.
Before you do that, I want to finish on this one. But Commissioner Novick suggested at the beginning that we might ban you from using dynamic pricing from between 2 and 6 a.m. Does your technology allow you to switch it off between 6 and 2
It does
and
not.
6? Yes?
It does not.
That was for Wave, wasn't it?
Oh, well, no.
We'll come back. So I have a couple of questions that I'm going to address to both of you, and just if I could get a yes, no, or if it doesn't lend itself to that, we can discuss it a bit. Let's start with business licenses. First, Uber, then Lyft. Are 100% of the drivers on your platform in compliance with our requirement that they obtain a valid Portland business license?
Yes.
And Lyft?
Yes, we had to sign that under penalty of perjury for a permit.
That's the lawyer in you saying that. On the service agreements, the long, complicated documents that no one ever reads, but they always check online that they've read and agree to its terms. Have you, since you were here 4 or 5 months ago, have you tailored your service agreements to conform to Oregon law? First, Uber.
When this topic came up before, and will preface that I'm not a lawyer, but I believe in our service agreement, it does state, and I think that this is common, that any state or local law will supersede a service agreement. So should a city law exist or a state law exist, just because our service agreement may be in slight conflict with that, the law that's in place supersedes whatever is in a service agreement, so it's absolutely in compliance with state and local law.
So I'm a recovering lawyer. I used to be a lawyer, but I don't do it anymore. And let me just urge you, because the service agreement is designed to provide notice to your customers of the ground rules, I don't find it very comforting that a typical customer would have to go get a lawyer to find out which clauses actually apply or don't or are superseded. So the one way I think you could give excellent customer service is to have a service agreement that's tailored to Oregon law so that there isn't a question about whether any of the clauses apply. And I'm just going to renew my request that you consider that. I think that I think it's in some ways, a reflection of your values as to whether you want to put out information that's inconsistent with Oregon law. And since all we're talking about is having someone scrub it so that anything that's inconsistent you remove, rather than have a catch-all clause that says it may or may not apply depending on Oregon law. I view this as a pro-consumer thing, so I'll just renew my request that you consider that. Dan Saltzman was the third vote to move forward with this trial, so I was a little surprised that Uber has proposed that we eliminate the requirement for a fire extinguisher, which was one of his amendments. I'm just curious, what is it about a fire extinguisher that is a problem for the driver or for the company?
Sure. I think, one, I would like to point out that every driver has a fire extinguisher in the vehicle, and that is passed out at the point of vehicle inspection. Our largest concern is the precedent that sets. If there is an emergency and there's a rider in the vehicle or the driver is in the vehicle, we want that rider and that driver to exit the vehicle and call 911. We do not want a driver to feel that because they have a fire extinguisher in their vehicle, it is their responsibility to then take it upon their own hands to put out a fire. We want them to call 911 and go to safety. I think that's very actually fair when you put I guess that's my question to the commission too, is what is the intent of putting a fire extinguisher in the vehicle, and what would you like those drivers to use that fire extinguisher for?
As of now, you're in compliance.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't know the answer. Dan can speak for himself, but it's sort of like, why do we have a kit in the car containing bandages and ointments and other things? We're not suggesting that people be nurses and doctors, but it's a backup, and it's an additional safety measure. And I'll leave it to Dan to propose that, but it's something that Dan proposed, the council agreed to, and if it does in some way become a problem, I'd ask you to put it in writing and explain to us practically how it's a problem. And then finally, there's been some news stories across the country of people who've fallen through the cracks on background checks. And in any system, a background check is not going to be perfect. After all, I'm an example of someone who slipped through the electorate and got placed on this body. So no system is completely safe, foolproof. So my question to you is, in light of the documented stories across the country of bad actors passing a background check and placing the public at risk, what assurances can you give people in Portland, in the Portland metropolitan area, that your drivers are safe?
So from Uber's perspective, we have been following the background check requirements laid forth by this commission. Those background checks, a subset of every driver, is turned over and then reviewed by PBOT. So we think that process is a good one, and we're happy to continue to do that. So we think that there is a checks and balances system there. Furthermore, we are akin to the same requirements as taxi here in the city of Portland. We go 10 years back on the background check. The requirements, if you have a violent crime conviction, they will be excluded from going onto the platform. So I think that the standards are actually very, very similar, and we'll see the same things. I can also say that no background check, as you pointed out, is perfect. There are examples across the country of all kinds of background checks having things fall through the cracks. For example, in Seattle, we actually have denied approximately 8% of taxi drivers who go through a live scan check. In the state of California, there's over 600 people that made it through the California taxi process that have been denied to drive on the Uber platform, and there are over 475 livery drivers, which is similar to a chauffeur vehicle here in Portland, that have been denied on the platform for failing a background check. So you see holes on both sides.
So how many have you denied in Portland?
I do not know the exact answer to that. I would say it's probably between 5 and 15%.
I'd like
I'm
to know
happy
that
to get an exact
in
number
October,
for you.
please. Thank you.
How about our friends at Lyft?
Absolutely. We follow all of the requirements laid out by the city. And on top of that, because we're in such close reporting partnerships with PBOT, PBOT has basically daily information about drivers. They also do receive any complaints and concerns. So if anything does come up, that can be addressed immediately. So we do firmly stand behind our background check provider, Sterling Backcheck. I was actually on a series of meetings this week where I actually had our Vice President of Compliance to speak to cities, speak to regulators, and really talk through how that process works from the very beginning of running the official name, the driver's license, the social security number, past addresses. It's a very comprehensive background check that's national and goes down to the local databases.
I guess my final question is, someone showed me on an app the other day that as you move away from the central city, you're more likely to get a reading that there's no available car for a Wave customer. Why is that?
So for our example, we currently partner with Wapato Shores during the weekdays. Their office is located in the center of town. And so basically what happens is because we are, as Commissioner Salzman was asking, we are paying them hourly to be available, they essentially sit at that office location with the with the app available so that they are able to take a request. Because in general, we are submitting data showing how the waves are requested, how they are fulfilled, and it'll be very clear that based on the data, demand actually is pretty limited. And so in essence, the wave drivers are typically sitting idle.
And
Uber?
We have a similar response. I believe the last data we submitted, there was approximately one trip a day, and the cars are, for the most part, sitting idle.
When you say one trip a day, does your data take into account people that have got a reading on their phone that says there's no car available?
Yes, absolutely. So what that means is even if you turn on the app and the Wave vehicle is 29 minutes away, it'll still show that you can actually request that vehicle.
But the app that I saw showed that as you got closer to 82nd, it was more likely to pop up no vehicle available. So that's not a request. So we wouldn't know whether that person, we wouldn't know what the service level for that person was. And I just have to impress upon you, and I'm not, this is anecdotal, this is just someone taking out their phone and walking me through this, but it was kind of uncanny. The farther you got from downtown, the center of the city, the greater the likelihood that there was no Wave vehicle available. And that is triggering some very dearly held values in this community around equity. You're talking about people that don't live in the central city, maybe disproportionately low income, maybe disproportionately people of color, and if they have a disability, they're no different than anyone else who has a disability. And so if the system does not provide parity to people by zip code, we have a problem. And I'm going to want to know how we address that problem going forward.
And may I briefly address? So I think that's where the Accessibility Fund is a really profound idea, because I think what the issue is how do we match the number of Wave vehicles actually available to give a ride to the people who want the ride. And the issue is many of the 20% of the taxis who are Wave accessible vehicles are actually being, for example, contracted for non-emergency medical transport. Similar to our partners, they also have non-emergency medical transport contracts in place that pay very, very well. So the issue is, for us, the concern is availability, right? And I think that once we can basically pool all of these resources together and essentially have true accounting of the Wave vehicles available, we will address that. The city will address it in the best
Can
way
I
possible.
jump in here?
Absolutely.
It was my understanding from a conversation the other day that you don't know how many times somebody has opened up an app and they haven't made a request, but it shows no vehicle available. But I think that Ms. Deeger at least said that you could put something that for Wave requests, you could put something on the app that says, even if you see no vehicle available, if you want a vehicle, please make a request. And if people start doing that, then we can get a better sense of how often people actually want Wave service and it's not available.
Yes,
Is that
absolutely.
correct?
I thought that was a very good idea.
Okay. The other thing, though, is that we frankly do not have a great history of enforcement of Wave availability for private for hire industry, period. I mean, a year ago, we couldn't have told you that we were doing lots of monitoring of availability of Wave taxis, and they were available all hours of the day in all parts of the city. But when we decided to authorize TNCs in the city, it was with the understanding that you were going to be providing Wave service and 24/7 citywide service. And by your own admission, you haven't been doing that. So I want to know two things. One, how close are you to that now? And why shouldn't we assess penalties for the period within which you actually haven't been in compliance with that requirement?
If we go back to the pilot rules, we are in compliance with those pilot rules and looking about availability and response times. We tried as hard as possible to meet those. Those were based on averages. So I just want to be clear that that was what was set out on the pilot terms.
Well, my recollection is that the rules acknowledge that you might have differential response times between waves and non-waves, but still required that you have some sort of coverage, 24/7 wave coverage. And it's my understanding that admittedly, for big chunks of time during the week, at least until recently, you simply had no coverage available at all.
So I do want to go back to that question about supply. The question is, how many wave vehicles are there in the city of Portland? And how many are available at any given moment of the week? I think that is a critical question because that is how we can have those partnerships.
You mean
and create
across
that
all
availability.
providers?
Across all providers, yes.
Right, but you could have
absolutely.
chosen not to start operating until you knew the answer to that question and could provide 24/7 citywide wave service.
Ms. Sager, do you want to respond to that?
Sure. I mean, actually, I think the fact that we are operating while there are gaps and there are problems actually has allowed us to better, I believe that there is better wheelchair accessible data than there ever has been in this city. It has allowed us to understand where the needs of the community are. It has allowed us to build a P2P wave product, which we would have never been able to build here in the city if we weren't operating here. So actually, I think that this has actually, and it's allowed us to sit on the subcommittees and provide feedback and understand the needs of the community. So I think doing it and starting to learn is actually better than not doing it at all. And I think we've made some huge strides here. And I think with the subcommittee proposed by having a fund is a very, very good step in the right direction. But I don't think we should just not offer service to anyone because our service cannot be perfect. I think that we should learn from it and we should iterate off of it and grow from it and continue to make the service levels for everyone, and no matter who you are, better.
How quickly do you think you can implement that idea of if you turn on the app and and you're seeking wave service, it tells you, actually, I think as soon as you open the app, it says if you're seeking wave service, actually request a ride. Don't just look at what the map shows you.
We'll have that done by the end of the week.
So I guess just in your defense, I thought I heard Jody Yates say that the data shows that wave requests for Uber or Lyft are responded to in about 12 minutes.
That is
Whereas for
correct.
taxis, it's 23 minutes.
That is correct.
Okay,
yes.
so something's working here. It's maybe not perfect, and I've heard a lot of people from the disability community express a lot of satisfaction with the entrance of Uber and Lyft into the market. Anyway, I just want to get that out there. I guess I just wanted to ask you, who is for each one of you, who is your local agent of service and what is their phone number?
So, that depends on, are you talking about a legal agent of
I'm
service?
talking about what was agreed to under the trial period rules.
Yeah, I
Each company
believe-
is supposed to have a
right.
local agent of service along with a local phone number and regular hours of business.
Yes,
So,
that's correct.
Who
and
is that
I
for?
believe that's in our permit information. I don't have that right off the top of my head.
Does somebody with you here have that information?
Let's try to get that while we're having the hearing. Same with you.
Yeah, I have
Can we
this.
get that while you're having the
Yeah,
hearing?
I'm not responsible for setting up our local agents of service, but I can of course get that to you. I will also point out that we do have a permanent office with employees here, though we typically do not offer phone support. We do offer 24/7 email and social media support. We also have support via the app. You can
Yeah,
gain
but
support, but.
part of the rules you're operating under right now require a local agent
Absolutely.
and a phone number.
And I know that we do have a local agent, and we're happy to get you their name and contact information.
Phone number. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, other requests? Thank you both very much. Let's move along. Now we next want to call taxi driver Darren Campbell.
Good afternoon. Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, under council rules, I am a registered lobbyist with Radio Cab. However, today I represent the 2,200 plus cab drivers as a private hire transportation taxi driver representative. After seeing some of the discussion already today, I can go in about 100 different directions, so I'm a little conflicted. But I want to really, push the importance of proper insurance on the industry. And when you say that when Uber says that there's a policy out there that's been written, that's been approved by state and state and state, it hasn't been by this state, and they want to impress upon you that they will not get an insurance policy unless it's of their choosing. There's policies out there, and if, as far as I'm concerned, I think the fair thing to do would be to have them be registered as commercial vehicles and have the same exact coverage of taxi cabs. Period one is not just people sitting around at home watching TV, drinking coffee. A lot of the time, it's vehicles trying to get back down to a high area of call volumes in between calls. Sometimes it's the most dangerous driving that a professional driver does because their income depends on it. With that being said, I also had an opportunity to sit on the subcommittees during phase two. From the taxi cab side, we were insistent that caps needed to be in place on vehicles for both the taxi industry and the TNC industry. It's oversaturation of the market. And you'll notice that there's a huge decrease in volume of Uber and Lyft drivers in this room right now. And that's because they've started to become dissatisfied. I talk to every single Uber and Lyft driver that I can possibly get within talking distance to, and in the last number of weeks, they're saying there's less and less orders, there's more saturation, there's more drivers on the road, less orders per vehicle. What that's going to do is that's going to drop service, that's going to make it more unsafe with less professional drivers on the road. And then at the last part of that, you're going to have less quality of driver. You're going to end up with shorter-term drivers who can't make a living driving, and so you're going to have a revolving door of drivers and constantly have rookies on the road. Now, one of my other roles is a safety committee chairman at Radio Cab. Whenever we put on a bunch of new drivers, our accidents go up. It's always the new drivers that have issues, and if we have this revolving door, we're going to have issues there. I've got a whole lot of other things that I really want to put out there. I guess I can do that via email, unless you want to set up a meeting time now, Commissioner Novick. I'd be more than happy to meet with you on some other things. There are 3 more cab companies coming to town for another 250 permits. United Independent, Rainbow Cab, and PDX Yellow or something like that. So it's not
planning to start operations, you mean?
Correct. They were authorized by Commissioner Novick at the beginning of the 120 trial. They were passed by the Private Hire Transportation Board. At that time, when they were passed, they were supposed to come to City Council. However, the rules changed on who approved those, so they were just green-lighted by Commissioner Novick. I've seen the United Independent Cabs painted, a couple of them. We've seen the yellow PDX. I have yet to see the rainbow cab. So they're out there. They're getting ready, getting geared up. PBOT could probably tell us how close they are to actually getting plates, but they're putting cars into service.
Are we charging them a permit?
One last thing. Brooks Steiger was very clear on saying that their P2P service was a first worldwide put here in Portland. So why can't Portland be the first one worldwide to put caps on TNCs? There's a lot of things here in Portland that we can do for the first time on TNCs that would be innovative. They would be seen as incredibly intelligent, and they would probably make this traffic system a great deal better. And I'm the first one to admit that we have improvements that need to be made. So with that, I will take any questions you may have.
I just want to encourage you, you said that you had a lot of other points you wanted to make, and all of us read our mail. So since this trial period's being extended, I hope you'll send your comments, your detailed comments in writing, because they will be read.
Absolutely, and I admit I'm horrible at it, but I'm going to make a point of it. One thing I know that I talked to Commissioner Fritz before this meeting. I know that Noah Ernst from Radio Cab sent out a packet in regards to insurance. It was very informative on what's going on across the country right now with Uber, TNCs, drivers, personal insurance. I'd encourage you to really do an in-depth look at that, and I'm sure that you all have that. If not,
Yeah, I do
talk
want
to
to
your staff
encourage,
people.
yeah, again, keep that kind of material coming, because we will read it.
So I'm interested to hear that there's 3 new taxi cabs coming. One of the guiding principles, according to the task force, is the ability for taxi and TNC companies, drivers, to earn a living wage.
It's becoming more and more impossible. And every single day I hear of another cab driver that's got to leave this industry because they cannot make it.
So that's my question. It's my understanding in other cities, there are medallion systems. There are other mechanisms to ensure that, for taxis at least, drivers are able to earn a full-time wage. Are there any other cities that are just letting taxis be completely, I mean, what other cities allow unlimited numbers of taxis?
You know, you could look at every city and look at a totally different taxi model. There's so many different types of taxi
We're not going to
models
have any
out there.
taxi model, right?
Yeah. And even in the city of
Proposal?
Portland, to answer the question of employment, you know, you have EcoCab that's employee-driven. You rode with them. There's Rainbow Cab is coming. They're going to be employee-driven. You know, if you want to do some sort of quasi-independent employee status, that's some sort of hybrid, I think that needs to be left up to the federal government. But right now, we have enough options for the driver to be able to go to a company that might fit their needs as an employee or independent contractor. And you've seen the data. Taxi drivers can go either way on that question. Some want the extra added incentives of being an employee, and they're willing to trade off their lack of freedom to do that. Then there's those that want the freedom, are willing to take the lack of all those incentives for the freedom.
Commissioner, I've been hoping to find some way that through regulation, we can improve working conditions for drivers other than continuing to give a monopoly to a limited number of companies, because I just don't think that giving monopolies to companies is the best way to protect workers. I mean, Walmart has monopoly status in a lot of small towns, but that does not mean they pay their workers well.
Commissioner, one of the ways, though, in a prior council that we addressed this issue was we made it possible for a group of employees to start union cab. And they were folks that wanted to work on improving terms and conditions of employment. They were very intentional. They wanted to be employees, and they wanted to maximize their rights under federal state law. One of the things that troubles me is that we keep being told there's anecdotal evidence that people want to be independent contractors. We're told, we understand from the business model that there are enormous advantages for these technology/transportation companies to classify people as independent contractors, but it comes at a significant sacrifice of people's rights under state and federal law, and that includes the right to organize collectively to improve working conditions. So I find that deeply ironic.
But of course, the taxis have generally treated people as independent contractors too. And so your concern extends to the industry before the advent of TNCs as well as after.
No, but I'm pointing out that the union cab permit and the organizing around union cab was specifically designed to address this. I mean, that was something the AFL got behind because they were hoping it would actually raise the working conditions for the industry. I agree that there were anomalies before. I just don't want to make sure that we make it worse.
It's not that there were anomalies, it's that there was no requirement before that taxi cabs treat drivers as employees, period. I mean, might have been one or two that did, but there wasn't a requirement.
Okay.
Can I make one more?
Please. Yeah.
In regards to the payments that Mr. Antler brought up in regards to what's due in August, a very fair thing to do would be to roll those back to 2012 prices, which were $150 per cab. The whole reason for that increase from $150 per plate to $600 was increased enforcement, which we saw none. We saw more paper pushing, zero increase in enforcement. It would be really easy to go back to those prices, probably keep the staff levels the same. They've added a couple employees during that time. However, they were absorbed by Peabot. They lost Frank DeFay. I don't know where they're at there, but I can't imagine that they're utilizing that much more money on staffing of not doing what they said they were going to do with the increase.
And what does the board suggest that we do with these new companies? What are we going to charge them?
You know what? The Private Hire Transportation Board has not met since Commissioner Novick has taken over the powers of that board. So we're useless in regards to that's concerned. My guess is that they were going to come in at that $600 per plate charge, just like every other taxi cab in the city. I'm sure that Ron Norrie's here. He could probably testify that EcoCab is paying $600 per plate on the 15 or 16 units they just put on at EcoCab.
So colleagues, this is clearly something we have to fix soon. We can't wait till October to fix this.
And the other thing with that payment, it's different at different cab companies. I just talked to Testify. He pays for all his cabs. At Radio Cab, it's the individual owners. I own 2 different vehicles at Radio Cab, or 2 half shares, I should say. I'm going to pay $600 more than my usual fees. That doesn't come from the company, like Testify's company does. I think Broadway pays for all their vehicles. They don't have, but at Radio, it's the owners themselves, and there's many of us in this room that are going to be hit with a $300 to $600 bill, if not more, depending on how many shares you own, in August, at the end of August. And it's a huge burden, especially when you're dealing with trying to keep a car or 2 or 3 cars on the road, and you're dealing with limited resources because a whole bunch of them have been taken away. And when Mr. Netler talks about that 7 to 8 to 13% decrease, we're not talking about an even decrease across the board, that the TNCs are just picking up these trips and we're losing these. We're losing prime quality trips because they're taking the ones that have credit cards and cell phones, typically going to the airport, longer trips, and we're picking up more of the grocery store, short trip rides. So we're losing $40 trips and picking up more $7 trips.
So, Mr. Campbell, the data shows that the length of trips for TNCs and taxis is about the same, like 12 and a half minutes versus 14 minutes.
You know, I don't know how to undo all that and look at that. I just know that I spoke to our dispatch manager who specifically looked at that information, and that's the information he told me. I can talk to him. I can get you that information in more of a dialed in manner so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about. That's how he explained it to me.
On the permit fees, I think that we should, if we legally can, postpone assessing those permit fees on Radio Cab and the other companies until we've developed a comprehensive change to the permits based on a cost recovery model. So I'm going to consult with staff and see if that's at all possible. Just simply postpone assessing those fees until we have a more comprehensive solution.
Or you could also charge Uber and Lyft and all them the same fees and then work it out and see what the fair ratio is for everybody to pay into the system.
Okay.
But I guess I'll ask this as a question to Mr. Campbell, but it's also something I was going to suggest to Commissioner Novick in the next phase here to consider. But the task force has recommended, we really need to move from sort of the permitting mode to a compliance and enforcement mode. And I know that costs money, costs resources to hire people in the city government to enforce the laws. But I think it's critically important because, I find myself at each one of these hearings sort of trying to figure out what is the truth here. And the only way we're going to have truth is through hard-nosed verification and enforcement. So how do you feel about a 50-cent per passenger fee that would go to dedicate, I don't know if 50 cents is the right number, but just like we're doing a 10-cent waive fee, a 50-cent fee dedicated to compliance and enforcement. And we probably don't even need your permit fees under that kind of scenario.
I've been very open to the fact that I think that is, and I brought it up in subcommittees, and this is my point of view representing the drivers, so don't let the TFL get in the way here, whatever they're called. TFA, sorry. I believe that that's the most fair way to do it. Whatever that number is, 50 cents, 65 cents per trip. The consumer's going to pick who they want to pick, but if they all have to pay that one fee that goes to fund the entire system, then that's the most fair way to do it in my mind.
Okay.
That's all well and good if the resulting savings is passed on to the drivers, whatever nature. If it's simply more money in the pockets of the corporations, be they TNCs or...
It would be passed straight forward to the passenger.
I know, but currently the corporations are paying for the fees, for the permit fees and for the enforcement.
Per ride basis.
Yeah, I'm suggesting we probably don't need the permit fees if we can collect a per ride flat fee that comes straight from the passenger.
Well,
I feel
that's
like
very
creating a
nice for
sales
the
tax to
outs-
take
for
the
the
place of an income tax.
Well, I
right?
mean, we're talking about a 10%. We're talking
Not that
about,
I'm proposing
we're
that.
talking about a 10%, a 10-cent waive fee, so this would be the same concept.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
it's-
since we're parking either questions or follow-up, Steve, could I also ask, maybe that our city attorney could just prepare a little memo for us on what currently is the scope of authority of the Innovation Task Force and the existing regulatory body that we have? Because I think it seemed like we have two different bodies that have some authority, that now I'm getting confused about really who does what. And so if we have a board of review and a set of regulations and code that apply to that, and we have a task force, I'd like just a little primer on the legal authority of both bodies, and to what extent does the board of review still operate and function, and for what purpose?
The recommendation is to get rid of the board of review and make it something ineffective, basically a consulting group to.
We haven't adopted any recommendations, so I'm just.
I'm just telling you what the recommendation is, yeah. I
I'd like-
appreciate the question.
I'd
It's
like
another
to-
issue we want to hear from you on.
I'd like to better understand what is its status in this interim period.
Thank you very much.
All good?
Thank you. and
Thank you, gentlemen.
Keep it coming,
Ma'am.
thank you. Okay, I think we have a TNC driver rep, Dan Payton.
Good afternoon. My name's Dan Payton. I'm a driver and a passenger. I've only, at this point, driven for Lyft and ridden with Lyft. I haven't utilized Uber at this point. But I just wanted to say thank you guys for all of your work. This is not just a simple, do we allow, do we not, do we send them home, do we keep them going? There's a lot of ins and outs to make everybody happy here, and I really appreciate everyone's work on all the councils and task force and everything to make this happen. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of butting heads going on when we're trying to merge a couple of different things together here. But I mean, the way I see it, everyone's got a GPS locator and a computer in their pocket. So it's just kind of the next evolution to, use the available technology we have to make things more efficient and get the passengers basically service as quickly and efficiently as possible. I just still would like to reiterate that everyone needs to think of the passengers involved. From my own previous experience, I had attempted a few times to use previous transportation options, but honestly, I stopped being a customer. So at this point, now I have options to get around. Granted, there's not 24/7 wheelchair access, vehicles available, but I've been noticing improvements as time goes on. It's getting better and better. And as someone who basically didn't have very many options at all to get around, now I have a lot more. And just one second here. And that's kind of the issue with the Wave service, is having those dedicated vehicles available for use. Because I know with some of the other transportation companies, they have wheelchair accessible vehicles, but they're also available to be used for standard calls as well. So it kind of affects the availability. So how do we go and say, hey, we need to have these particular vehicles available, and pull them away from whatever they're currently doing? Like, I heard the non-emergency medical transportation pays X hourly rate. So for Lyft and Uber to have basically guaranteed Wave service, they're gonna have to pay an hourly rate to match or exceed. But we're not, 24-hour right now, but like I said, it's getting better. At first, when I fired up the app on both of them, it'd say, oh, well, I live down near like Oswego, sort of by Tualatin. So I'm pretty much out of the range of most of the services, but I've noticed both Lyft and Uber have changed their apps now so that when you're further away from the city, you can still get a Wave vehicle. This morning when I looked before I came here, you could get one as far south as Wilsonville. It's obviously going to take a little longer to get there, but I'm fine with that. I'm not in the central core of downtown. But I'm just saying, everyone stick with it. We're going to get this worked out. Urge you guys to listen to the passengers as well as the people operating vehicles. And on the driver perspective, it's worked great for me. It's the same thing everybody said, setting your own hours and controlling your work environment is key for me. But being a driver gives me flexibility when, honestly, other ways I have not been able to have gainful employment. So for me specifically, it works very well. And I'd just like to thank everyone again, and please just stay the course. And everyone think of the other parties involved, passengers, drivers, passengers, business owners, and just kind of take a step back is my main advice.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Payton, I do have a question, which is that we've heard the argument made that lots of TNC drivers, when they realize how much cost they're incurring in the wear and tear in their car, realize that it's not worth it and quit. Are you able to sort of figure out in advance what the wear and tear in your car costs are and figure out if it's worth it to you counting that in?
It seems like there's a couple different types of people driving. There's some that want to drive for a TNC as a full-time job. They're the ones driving, for Lyft and Uber. And there's other people like me that are just kind of a part-time deal. For me, I don't really factor in wear and tear because I only drive a few hours a week. But I would say, there's probably going to be some cost involved, obviously, the more you drive. But the one thing that has surprised me, though, is how few miles I've actually driven. Because at the most, I've worked probably 10 or 12 hours a week. And I'd be lucky maybe to do 30 or 40 miles in a night. It's a lot of real short hops here and there. People getting from their bars back to their hotels or homes. And they say, oh, well, we could have walked, but, we're drunk. It's better just to ride with someone. So I think that is a valid concern. But surprisingly, I only have to fill up once a week when I'm driving the tank, and it's been a lot less than I thought.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, let's move to folks on the sign-up sheet, I think. No, I'm sorry, I left out Levon Heister from the Portland Commission on Disability. Sorry. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me today. Thank you to the task force for asking PCOD to come. One thing I'd like to say is that this has been for the Portland Commission on Disability a real opportunity to have a voice and become more involved at an earlier stage. Oftentimes on the commission, we're brought in after all the plans are already done, and you say, oh, please approve this, or, give us feedback. And sometimes it's such a mess that it's a little bit late for us to be getting involved. And I feel like this time we were brought in early. There were some rocky starts, but really all of us have been very impressed in how we have been able to work together through Joe's expertise and lived experience coming in, and he does have a lot of expertise above and beyond lived experience. He also has expertise because he's been working in the disability advocacy field for a long time. So it's been wonderful to have this opportunity to work together, and I really do appreciate that and want to make that very clear. For the commission, we're not so invested in how we get to wherever we're going to be. We're invested in the outcome. We're invested that people with disabilities are included in the process of making the decisions, that our voice is heard, that we're not just there as a token. Oh, look, we've put someone with a disability on the task force, so we've done our part. And that we're actually being included in the decision-making and bringing forth ideas that maybe wouldn't have come out of people who don't know the experience of living in a body that needs a wheelchair as a tool to get around. And so I think that that's what's really important to us, is not how we get there. So we're not, because we have people on the commission. We have an Uber driver on the commission. We have people from who on various different sides of the issue. So it's not, for us, it's not about how you get there. It's about getting us there. And for the first time, really, I think we feel like the disability community is being considered in this process. The 20% rule of waive accessible vehicles was a really great idea, and there was someone in the disability community who did bring that in. It was a great idea, but it was not followed up on to see if it was actually making the difference that was needed. And I think that's where we're at now, is that when you get to the end of the trial period, the pilot period, that what is going to be done to make sure that it is going to continue working for our community. And so we would like to ask that we have people involved as this moves forward from the commission, and that we also, when you're ready to take things in front of council, that you also come in front of the Portland Commission on Disability, because you're going to get a cross-disability perspective by coming in front of us, whereas if it goes straight here, you're going to have us come in and testify. But if you bring it in front of us, you're going to get people like myself who are legally blind. You're going to get someone who has the lived experience of living with a mental illness, which, let me tell you, does affect your transportation needs. And you're going to get this wider variety. We've been focused on waive accessible vehicles, which is really important, but I am hoping moving forward that this will also begin to look at some of the other issues that are experienced out in the community. So really, I want to keep this short and sweet. I'm going to end there, but I do have one other little note that's off topic. Earlier, Mayor Hales, you did say about the, doing the wave or the thumbs up. And for those of us who have limited vision, that's not an accessible format. And I noticed you haven't really been enforcing it, but I would say if you can say, oh, I see some hands out there or something like that, so we do create an accessible format.
Good suggestion. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Questions, Vermont? Thank you very much. Okay, excellent. Let's move on to public testimony. So if you've already heard your points made, obviously you can waive your right to speak, but those who are signed up, let's take them in order.
We have 65 people signed up. The first three are Stephen Lovejoy, John Orr, and Nona Carrasco.
Okay.
And they'll be followed by Jim Porman, Paul Vanneman, and Dorn Matthews.
Okay, whoever would like to go first?
I'll go first. My name is Steve Lovejoy. I work for Radio Cab. I've been a cab driver for 6 years. I would like to just first start out by saying Radio Cab has been carrying people with bicycles for our entire time, and unlike somebody else, we don't charge extra for it. So it's not a big innovation for this Uber pedal. My tone has kind of changed after sitting here and listening to this today. After the last city council meeting, I was furious, like most of the cab drivers in here, so I kind of have to reprogram myself for what I'm going to say up here. But I would like to say that Mayor Hales, a couple of weeks ago, I watched an interview with you on KATU, at which during the interview, you stated that you asked some very tough questions to the TNCs and that you had raised the bar nationally, if not internationally, in dealing with the TNCs. And you specifically cited insurance requirements, driver background checks, and disabled people accessibility. Since this 120-day pilot program is about over, these are a few things that I've noticed. Taxis are required to have commercial insurance. TNCs are not. Taxi drivers are required to go through a city background check. TNC drivers are not. And taxi companies are required to have a certain percentage of their fleet, like we've all been stated here, to be wheelchair accessible. TNCs do not. What is there, 2,500 Ubers? I just looked on there. They have one wheelchair accessible vehicle, and if you're lucky if you can even get that. So after I watched your interview, I was kind of mad because you sat there and were telling the people that you had done all this innovation, but nothing has changed. It's like in every city, they're just kowtowing to Uber and letting them, changing the rules to modify for them. Things that I have noticed is up until today.
Try to wrap up quickly so
Okay,
we
up
can
until
hear more
today,
people.
I have noticed a lack of concern for how this has affected our industry. Today, it's been a little more warm to our industry rather than just the TNCs. I've also noticed unlimited access from the TNCs to City Hall. Well, we have very limited access to City Hall. And most importantly, I've noticed some questionable ethics that have gone on with members of our city council that have made everybody question it. You also said in there that we were unhappy about the rules because we were afraid of competition, and that simply is not true. You've stacked the deck against us and have essentially sent us into a gunfight with armed with only a slingshot, and that's what we're unhappy about. We're not afraid of competition by no means. We're professional drivers. We're not part-time drivers. So I just wanted to let that be said, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name's John, radio cab driver, and so I'm here today. I wanted to talk about. Well, thank you all for letting me listen to me and let me be here. Uber says that the ADA doesn't apply to them. That's great. You got them to put on 4 vehicles that were already in existence in Portland that you could get through another means of dispatch. So they really added a net of no vehicles, but wow, you can order them on your phone. That's great. So they added no net new vehicles to the city, and yet we were required to have 10% of the fleets. It was going to be up to 20, but the ADA doesn't apply to them. So Uber could incentivize wave trips. You know, they give out a ton of freebies, a ton of promos, free $20 off when you sign up your friend, blah, blah, blah. Okay, free $250 bonus for signing up a driver. They've got money to throw around. They could easily, if it mattered to them or if they were required to do it, they could incentivize the wave trips, okay? But it's up to you to require them to do that, okay? They also are saying, well, we're just a technology company. But in other markets, in California, they did a pilot program where they, in addition to their loan programs, they actually also did leases for drivers of sedans. So they actually did a short-term lease that was more flexible than a typical car lease. Okay, so if they can do that for sedans because that's profitable, they could be regulated just like taxi companies to have 10% of their fleet be wheelchair-accessible vehicles. And then they are in the business of leasing vehicles to their drivers, or at least they've experimented with that in another market. They could be made to do that here, or they could leave and you could license more taxis and we'll continue to do it at a rate of 10% of our fleets, or 20 if you mandate that, or whatever the regulation is set for. But we're not going to put 4 vehicles on the road that we're already serving Portland through another means of dispatch and all of a sudden claim, we're really proud of this. Look at how many wheelchair accessible vehicles, and our stats look really great because we cooked the books, and you know, if a car was too far away and you didn't, and you ordered something else, then that's not included. And this time started late, so I still have about another minute. Okay.
We're going to round.
So, can we turn that beeper off? Anyway, so the cab industry, there's talk of a per ride fee, okay? The cab industry has already invested heavily in the cost of these wheelchair accessible vehicles. I have a friend who drives one.
I drive one.
Okay, these 2 friends also. Super expensive, especially the old Sprinters, but the Transit Connects as well. More expensive for fuel, more expensive to put on the vehicle, oil changes, everything. Okay, so that cost has already been incurred by our industry. I hope that you'll do what's fair, at least somewhat fair in one area, and not saddle the taxi industry, the legitimate taxi industry, with any more of the cost to help Uber, who's just bleeding money out in promotions but can't afford to be ADA compliant. Don't charge us to subsidize their ADA compliance. That would be ridiculous. Okay, another way that these statistics are ridiculous is our time calls aren't included. So you look at these numbers and their numbers are great and ours aren't, but we take a ton of prearranged calls where the wait time is 0 because we're already sitting there waiting because we offer that service to our customers, and you're accepting a data sheet that has that thrown out. I mean, again, you're letting this be stacked against us. And I mean, with all the lip service that's been paid to fairness and making sure everyone makes a living wage, I was kind of baffled by this until I read an article in the Willamette Week that discussed how a lobbyist that has previously been hired by Mr. Novick, Mr. Hales, and Mr. Saltzman has been hired by Uber. And I think one of your peers, Okay, so, and then it became, it made a little more sense how instead of saying, hey, these are policies that have been around for decades that, you know, sometimes aren't perfect, but most of the problems have been with the limited number of vehicles, policies that have worked, but we're in the paying lip service to fairness, we're going to completely bend over backwards, change these policies to fit the TNC business model at a detriment to taxi companies who have their businesses built around the existing regulations. And now we have to change to adapt to regulations that are tailored specifically to their business model. And with the appearance of impropriety based on this lobbying issue, it really, you know, yeah, I think you guys have some explaining to do, or at least two of your remaining members up here. I would like you to answer that. I was unsatisfied with what I read in the newspaper, and the osium is for the stench of corruption.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Nona Carrasco, and I drive for Radio Cab, and I also sit on the board, the safety board. I come from a 16-year background in social services and developmental health. I have found that our company's standards of professionalism align with my personal ideals. I take a great deal of pride in the services that I perform, including my services as a wheelchair van driver, as I also believe that all of our drivers do. We have learned through experience how to best navigate through the Portland streets, how to best service our riders, sober or otherwise, and how to best keep our vehicles operating safely. It takes a professional to accomplish these goals, and I don't believe that Uber and other services are providing that level of expertise. They may have some full-time drivers, but their recruitment efforts are directed at part-time casual drivers. The concept of ride-sharing is a quaint notion that has nothing to do with the reality of their business. Inexperienced and untrained people are attempting to provide professional services, and they are compromising the safety of their passengers and my community. As I already said, we learned through experience. Uber's business model, however, anticipates and necessitates a large degree of driver turnover. In a Forbes article from January this year, Uber's own statistics report, and I will quote this. The service currently has 162,000 active U.S. drivers, which is quadruple the amount that it had a year ago. And of those 162,000 drivers, 40,000 gave their first trip in December of 2014, indicating that 1 in 4 Uber drivers is new to the service. Some drivers are filling out new markets, but others are replacing the many drivers who quit. Uber data shows 11% of Uber drivers stop driving within a month, and about half are gone within a year. It has become the Wild West of transportation providers and virtually no oversight or accountability. We have an existing system with, I'm almost done.
Oh, your time started late because mine went over because it's been over, so keep going.
Okay, then
We're going to
I'll go
lose a
back.
quorum in about half an hour, so please.
Okay. Virtually no oversight or accountability. I urge the council to apply the same standards and regulations that govern the taxi industry to the new TNC industry rather than lift the regulations, which will be detrimental. We have an existing system with a group of people in the city private for hire transportation board that, unlike the task force handpicked by an Uber lobbyist, have a wealth and depth of understanding in this industry and have been and are perfectly capable of continuing to address and expand the need of taxi service in Portland without causing a destruction of people's livelihoods and without going backwards to the days that did not provide equal and safe service to everyone.
Thanks.
Next three are Jim Poorman. That's Jim Poorman, Paul Vanneman, and Dorn Matthews, and they'll be followed by Ray Roche, Mike Engel, and James Peters.
Mayor, could we just do some housekeeping real quick?
Yeah, I think we got to do a time check.
I just want to be transparent about this. This was scheduled for 3 hours. I have a 5 o'clock excused absence and a second shift going into the evening tonight. You now have 60 people who are going to testify. This could go to 6 to 7. What is the will of the chair?
Well, there are a couple of options, and I want to see what Commissioner Novick thinks as well. Go ahead and settle in. We're going to get to you no matter what, but do you want to continue it, or do you want to take a vote on accepting the report while we have a quorum at 5? What's your pleasure?
Who else is leading at 5?
Nick is. So the three of us could stay.
It's a quorum.
Okay. All right. So we'll continue, I think, until 5:45, at which point you're going to lose me because I've got a 6 o'clock.
Mayor, in that case,
board
I think
state.
we really need to ask people to stay within the time limit.
Okay, let's try to get everybody to stay within time limit and keep moving. And if you've heard someone else cover your points, just say so. Okay. Welcome, have a seat.
I'm going to stand up.
All right, go ahead.
I've been sitting all day.
All right, same here.
Well, my
Just give us your name, sorry.
Oh, my name's Jim Portman. I work for Radio Cab. I'm on an insurance thing that I've been working on for a long time. And I've been talking to a lot of people, and I'm going to come up with a petition on the insurance plan I got. I've had so many people. I mean, I've been doing it for 5-6 years now on this new plan. And the plan I got and the plan you got, I don't see no plan for insurance. I do not see no plan. There's a lot of cars out there, right? They got to have insurance, right? That's your job to make sure these people, I'm not picking on you, but you are the boss, okay? Thousands of cars out there driving without no insurance. Can you keep track of all those people? How do you do it? I got a plan that you can keep track of all those people, okay? And plus, you're putting all these people in these cars with no insurance. Today, you're doing that.
I think they do have insurance.
You did that. No, they don't have insurance. You think they have commercial insurance that you're supposed to have, but you ask any of these Uber drivers, do they have insurance when they're driving around? No. What, personal insurance? You got commercial insurance. Show me the proof.
Okay, why don't you, sir, go ahead and finish your
Because I'm
testimony.
going to tell you why. Because I used to drive a town car service, okay, years ago. I was the only one, pretty much, driving my town car having commercial insurance. I went by rules and regulations, okay? These
That's
people
okay.
did
You
not.
guys do cover this later because we got to keep on
That's
schedule.
commercial insurance.
Hey,
Okay.
Guys,
For what
guys, let's have the
period?
debate later. Let's
That-
keep
Yeah,
going.
what is that for what period? Is that only when they pick up people?
Let you settle that with him, but make your points because you're running out of time.
Well, here's the thing, okay? What I really want, my proposal is to make sure that everybody has insurance. I've asked the people on these ideas by putting tags on their cars saying they're certified, insured, with the expiration date, okay? I mentioned this to so many people and they love it.
Okay, good.
And see, because the thing is, why do we have all these license plates with their expiration dates? Do you understand?
I need you to finish up, sir.
Real fast, I'm going to say, the reason is because people need to find out, like the police, see if they got a license. But if we have a tag that says insured with the expiration date.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much. Sir, you're next.
Yes, sir. My name is Dorn Matthews. I'm a radio cab driver. I heard monopoly mentioned. Somebody said monopoly, and 10 companies is not a monopoly. It's a many-opoly. Let's pick that up.
An oligopoly, perhaps.
Is that it? Okay, there we go.
There's a word for it. Keep going here.
Doesn't sound as good. Let's see. So the things that should have already been handled before they even hit the streets. For example, if there's a limitation on the distance between you and a driver, and you can't place an order, I thought these guys wanted to be cab drivers. I mean, there's so much business out there, and if you don't want to do the trip, why even bother? And it's not their decision. It's the company's decided to make the proximity of the order placement extremely short. We don't have that limitation. I mean, you guys already know this. Let's see. I'm hearing, yes, a question mark on the insurance. I have no idea. Every time it was brought up, I heard, and I couldn't parse any of it. But as it stands, if there is any discrepancy whatsoever, those guys shouldn't have been on the road. I mean, that stands to reason. That's how many thousands of liabilities you're going to have to deal with in the future. It's kind of depressing. Let's see. So also, if any of you have seen Cab Dude out there, he's a guy in a van. He used to hide it. Now he has a top light because there's no enforcement. Everything's falling apart. So now we have Cab Dude. And I'm sure he's a cool guy, and your drunk daughters can trust him. But he's out there, and more than one of him. That's another thing. Also, you know what's going to happen if you ditch the cap system. You know what's going to happen. Everybody's going to be eating their shoes. It's not going to be pretty. There's got to be some way to stem the tide. We don't need 3 trillion drivers in the city professionally. Hey, why not? Let's see. The hands-off approach. Okay. So if there is anything about the improprieties and the scandal, I don't really know. I didn't read too much into it. But if that's the case, and it's been going back as far as the implication goes, all of you guys who showed up here in the onset, you were a meat shield. You got fined. I don't know if anybody got their car towed or anything, but it was just a big PR play stunt. And that's not cool by me.
All right, thank you. Thanks very much. You're on.
My name is Paul Vanham, and I've been a radio cab driver for just over 3 years. A little while back, I had the privilege of driving an older native of what's now referred to as North Williams neighborhood. She was the last holdout. Her house was nestled in the shadows of 2 sprawling luxury apartment buildings. Yet she refused to move. She told me that this was her home and that this was a community, and that when she went to a community meeting regarding her predicament, she realized that she was there merely to listen to what was going to happen. I believe that speaking here is an exercise in futility, and while I have nothing as saddening as her story, I have come to believe that these companies are going to be here whether I like it or not. I've already begun to save to move out of this city because my income has dropped about 40% while rent is skyrocketing. And with 1,200, whatever they are, the ride sharing things, and then 3 more cab companies, I don't know how anybody's going to be able to make a living doing this. I also don't understand that a company that came in here and wantonly broke the law was rewarded to operate with impunity, at least over this trial period. That doesn't make any sense to me, that when a company violates law, that then they are then rewarded. That to me is incredibly frustrating. And I also believe that for every cheerleader of this system of race to the bottom economics, making this a $10 an hour job that nobody can afford to live on anymore, I believe there are many people out there who feel, as I do, they feel alienated, and they feel the tension of that any day that the ground might fall out from under them. If there's any ethics involved in any of this, it would involve bolstering local business and not allowing predatory companies to claim our city as their new victory. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
The next 3 are Ray Roche, Mike Engel, and James Peters, and they will be followed by William Daniels, Justin Byington, and Vicky DeVincent.
Okay, come on up.
Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and go with Ray Roche, Mike Engel, William Daniels. Can you come on up? Right here.
Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Ray Roche. I'm a radio cab driver for about the last 4 years. Thank you for having me. I want to touch a little bit on the immigrant taxi drivers. They were brought into this country and promised a lot of promises. And I'm not going to point out all those promises. I'll let the lawyers for them do that. But they were promised to assimilate into our community, our customs, and our culture. And at these meetings, there's been less than 1% representatives from these people. they don't even know, and I've talked to several of them the last week, they don't even know that these chamber meetings are being held or where they're being held, which I think is, it's a damn shame. The rest of this basically pertains to them as well as the rest of us. But for the last 120 days, our lives have been put on hold. We cannot make any decisions about our standard of living, whether we want to put our children in a better school, buy them more school supplies. I believe this chamber has had a raise in the last 4 months where our incomes have diminished in the last 4 months. And now you just added another 4 months, so that's 8 months out of our lives that we can't make any decisions. We can't make any decisions on whether we can replace a 23-year-old car that we're driving or anything in relation to our families. I think it's selfish, and I think it's just rude way of treating your citizens. I applaud your task force for the work that they've done, the many hours that they put in, but when I hear the recommendations that they make, I have to wonder how many private room meetings they've had with Mr. Weiner. Because how can you not put caps when Uber wants to add 10,000 drivers to this city? And right now, unless Uber drivers are surging, they're not making any money. What they're doing is they're diluting everybody's income. They go out and they make 2 or 3 rides a day. We get 2 or 3 rides a day, so none of us make any money.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Go ahead.
My name is Mike Engel, and I'm retired. They've often covered many of the things that are my points, primarily that Uber came here under the deception that they were something new, that they were part of the sharing economy. A few people would be carpooling, yet they have testified at hearing after hearing about their jobs as cab drivers and how much time they're spending, 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week in their vehicles. Yet they claim to their private insurance companies that they aren't for hire vehicles. That is the deception that brings on this whole Uber situation. And you've talked about this. You need to demand proof from these vehicles and these vehicle operators that their insurance companies acknowledge that they are insuring a for-hire vehicle. And even though some of the drivers on that platform claim that they have collision and comprehensive insurance from their company, they don't. The other thing is that vehicle inspections, fees, license fees, taxes, vehicle identifications, and marking are missing. So actually, all you have to do is have an Uber driver's cell phone and a vehicle, and you are an Uber driver. All you need to do is have their platform, type it in, you can come out in your 1953 Honda and drive your car. We need to have vehicle markings and identification. Anyway, the decision that you make here is...
Hey, folks, let him finish, please.
The decision that you make here will either be to stand up for the local businesses or not. Many countries, entire countries, many metropolitan jurisdictions within the United States have refused to fall for their deception, and you could be one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Commissioner Fritz, Mayor Hales, Commissioner Novick, Commissioner Fish. Thanks for being here with us today. My name is William Daniels. I drive for Radio Cab. As you know, Portland has a system that is well established to manage the need for taxi service. City employees are very capable of fulfilling their job to responding to changing needs and changing technology. Therefore, it is okay to say no to arrogant companies that bully their way into Portland, to selfish companies that want to rewrite the rules to benefit them specifically, to sneaky companies that want to seduce you today because they want to take from the citizens of Portland tomorrow. For all the reasons that have ever been stated, it's okay to say no. For any one of the reasons that have been stated, it's okay to say no. Donald Trump is attracting a lot of support among voters because voters are fed up with politics as usual. Highly paid lobbyists who get special access, special favors from politicians. Voters are fed up with slick talk by corporations that sound really good up front, but that turn out to be really bad for our people and our communities. 2 weeks ago, right here in Portland, Bernie Sanders drew the largest group of people of any presidential candidate with a message that said, we the people are fed up with having our lives and our communities be ransacked by billionaire companies at the expense of we the people. So chopping up full-time work and spreading it out to part-time work is not a job creation program in any intelligent person's lexicon. But it is okay to say no. Portland's motto is the city that works. Here's the question. Will you folks vote to have the city work for the predatory out-of-town corporations and Wall Street companies or banks, or will you vote to have the city work for local businesses and local people? Once again, it is absolutely okay to vote no for TNCs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
The next three are Justin Byington, Vicky DeVincent, and Dirk Warninghoff. And they will be followed by Linda Rabb, Dan Barron, and Vivian Catlaps.
Good afternoon. Go ahead. Whoever would like to be first, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Hi, and thank you all for being here and hearing us.
Just give us your name, sorry.
I'm Vicky DeVincent with Radio Cab. I've been driving since May 2012. I have always been proud of driving with Radio Cab. I've constantly had customers from out of town compliment not only us as Radio Cab, but that's a reflection on you, the city council. Because I've had compliments that our cabs are clean, our drivers are professional, they care about the customers, they feel safe, they're efficient. And we've always known that the city council was the one that voted to limit the amount of permitted taxis on the road. Which what that does is it ensures there isn't a monopoly with medallion systems. It ensures there's not overpopulation of taxi drivers so that the taxi drivers are driving safely. They're not scraping ends meet and rushing to red lights to get customers because they're able to make a living wage. Now, I've also learned that Radio Cab used to have a union, but they didn't need it anymore because they had the city council put in place regulations that kept the community safe by having safe drivers. So, but since then, our community has grown with people moving here, with tourism increasing. We've become so foodie that people come here to visit. Our taxi companies have been begging and begging and begging for more permits to a limit that ensures the regulations keep everybody safe. And now, if we had, I'm so sorry, if we had those permits, we would have been able to see the need and meet the need of wheelchair drivers. I drive a wheelchair van. It gets 18 miles to the gallon. It's not, you know, a great business model to do it, but I do it. I love my community. And when you have people driving around not safe, not limited on how many hours they can work, I've heard of Uber drivers driving 20 hours a day. Our accidents on the road are gonna go up. They already have. You can already find data that since May, there's been more traffic accidents. There's gonna be more fatalities. If we completely deregulate the system the way it's looking like it's going to, the only way to get it back to the quality taxi service that we've had is for fatalities and injuries on the road that I don't want to see in my community.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much. Welcome.
Justin Byington. I work for Radio Cab. I'd like to note, though, that I was an activist long before I was a cab driver. I want to thank you for hearing our concerns today. I'm sure you can tell by the roses on our cabs and also here that we are very proud to serve Portland. We love the city because it's a progressive and very livable place due to the citizens' appreciation and support of local businesses. What happens here in Portland, it's not just important to those of us that live here, but also to other cities because they view us as a model for how well a city can work. While I sympathize with people just trying to get by, I've heard many emotional testimonies by those people, making a living driving for Uber and Lyft. I think there's a real disconnect when it comes down to what a corporation like Uber has as an image and what they actually will do. The companies, they put profits over people and caused the recession by doing so. And now with this new sharing economy, they're trying to take control of that sharing economy and take advantage of that to externalize their costs and to also take money out of our local economy. They aren't doing this by creating jobs. They're doing this by shifting to a less professional model that infiltrates an established locally run industry of experienced drivers, permitted professionals. Uber says that they're providing a lot of firsts regarding service here, but saying that you're going to provide something and actually doing it is different. Should we as a city support a company that admits they do not provide needed services in other markets because they're not required to? Just stating that a service is a good idea, but then not actually implementing it, that's not a solution. In summary, will Portland uphold a higher standard for the services to the public that we provide by keeping it local and putting people over profits? Or is this a case where corporations with lots of lobbyists and money dictate the restructuring of an industry that values profits over the people of Portland? Thank you for your time and considering our concerns.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Dirk Warninghoff. Thank you for your time today. I would like to address one of the advisory board guideline principles, which is no competitive advantage is granted to any provider for excluding classes of passengers or opting out of compliance with city, state, and federal standards. You're giving a competitive advantage by making us have forced caps by our percentage of wheelchair fleets that we put on a road, where the TSCs have no caps at all, so they don't, but they don't need any wheelchair vans. You give the TNCs a competitive advantage because unless you have a smartphone and a debit card, you can't order one, so taxis have to be for everybody. To accessible services, why is there no minimum requirement put on the TNCs? We had a minimum requirement for years. How is this fair at all? Your accessible transportation fund is a complete joke. You're giving big business a huge break, while the little guys have already been complying for years, get railroaded over with their wheelchair vehicle investments. Fishing has caps in this state, and so we still have enough fish for everyone. Transportation needs caps, so there's enough money to go around. When I attended a task force meeting, a majority of Uber drivers agreed with me on caps, but we all agreed their company would not agree with that. Are you rewriting these rules for the drivers who drive in this city or for the companies that employ the drivers? Because it certainly feels like you continue to make concessions for big business and not for the Portland working driver. As of labeling of vehicles, so that all sides, the public knows it's a transportation vehicle. 80% of complaints about taxis are from bystanders outside the taxi. How can you call to complain about a driver if you don't know it's a commercial vehicle? It would be really nice if they just had magnets maybe, like the Oregonian does, on all sides of the vehicle when they're working so that someone could know that it's an Uber car. That doesn't sound like it's that hard. And what about enforcement fees? Before the pilot program, each taxi in the city was required to pay $600 a year in enforcement fees. Every private for hire should have to have $600 down for their vehicle. If they have 2,000 vehicles, that's $1.2 million for enforcement fees for the city so that you can have people out there making sure that people are following the rules. Same fares, same rules, and I just was wondering what Brooke meant was, how does surge equal dynamic? I don't know. Thank you for your time, guys.
Thank you, thank you.
The next three are Wendy Kellington, speaking for Linda Rabb, and we'll go with Dan Varon, Vivian Catlaps, and they'll be followed by Tim Weller, Tony Seymour, and Dan Atkins. So I've got, right now is Wendy Kellington, Dan Varon, and Vivian Catlaps.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Wendy Kellington. I'm an attorney. I'm representing EcoCab, the latest cab company into the cab ecosystem. As you take a little bit of additional time to study innovation in the city's private for hire regulatory program, we want you to please give some serious consideration to one very, very important issue, and that's insurance and how it affects your other policies and social goals for serving the traveling public and for the taxi cab industry. To answer Commissioner Fish's question a long while back, what has been the cost to the cab companies, both pre and post pilot? For EcoCab, it's been $100,000. And that's because apparently Uber convinced someone that it was necessary for the city to abandon its approval of EcoCab's A-rated by Demotech, not the AM Best cartel, but A-rated Demotech insurance in favor of the kind of insurance that Uber gets. And it's like a sole source carrier. And so the insurance companies are allowed to charge whatever they like. And that's $100,000 for a new company like EcoCab that has zero-emission vehicles. To Commissioner Fritz's point, we are very interested in the emissions from taxi cabs, and so our business model is one that does not have those. We have Teslas on the road. So tomorrow, we're going to get a letter that we've got 120 days to buy that $100,000 extra Uber-type insurance. And what do you get for that? Well, that kind of insurance, we are informed, is one that's called non-admitted. That means they don't play by Oregon's rules, excuse me, and they don't pay into the safety net fund that the state has. And so if they are, in fact, big enough to fail, there's no coverage for the city, and there's no coverage for an injured customer. So, and what do you lose? Well, potentially you lose a really cool company. Can we survive? I don't know. Zero emission Teslas, paying attention to the disability community. Drivers are paid decent wages. They're employees. They get benefits, sick leave, vacation, 401k, health insurance. We think you ought to look real close at what maybe Uber has been telling you about insurance and balance what you really think you need. Maybe an AM Best B rating or B plus rating works okay. What you really need to achieve your goals for taking care of the traveling public, making sure they have access to the state's safety fund, safety net, and that you support these companies that are trying to do taxi cabs with decent living wages. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Kellington, I really appreciate your comments. I didn't understand the whole thing about the insurance. I want to get to other people's testimony. If you could either follow up with me, send me something, I want to understand better because obviously you know a lot about it. Thank you.
Same here. Would you submit that to us as well?
I'd be delighted. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. That'd be helpful.
Good luck.
Okay, who'd like to be next? Go ahead.
My name is Vivian Catlaps, and I am a driver with Radio Cab. And first, Commissioner Fritz, I'd like to thank you for, again, bringing up the environmental factor of adding so many cars to the road. And I believe it's over 2,000 that they've quoted. And the task force mentioned that they don't have enough information concerning the environmental impact, and I was suggesting maybe they should be in contact with somebody at DEQ or EPA or ODOT to know how so many more cars are going to be impacting the roads. And I'm sure that they also have information about the number of miles that are being driven. One of my biggest concerns with the TNCs, specifically Uber, is that all of their advertising is for more drivers. Not only that, they specifically encourage people to purchase brand new cars through their, what I've heard to be shifty loan agreements with financial companies or getting people to sign up with these companies. And there's a huge impact of the number of vehicles that are being produced. We don't need brand new cars on the road. We already have bad traffic. Our roads are suffering. The emissions right now, even concerning the weather, but it's not a good state to have no caps on the number of vehicles that are driving around. Another thing that the task force representative mentioned was that TNCs may overall decrease the number of vehicles on the road by providing so many trips, which I think is really unlikely, considering how their whole model is to increase the number of drivers on the road. Also, if that's the case, then you really need to bring TriMet into this conversation, because if they're going to be affecting our traffic that drastically, we have tax dollars that are going into having maxes and new lines and bus lines put into system. And that's much more important than Uber, in my opinion. In addition to that, I want to speak on the wait times. There are some key things. They mentioned that wait times for TNCs are mostly during the night when there's no traffic. They said that the wait time is an average of 12 minutes, whereas cabs are 28 minutes. I am a Wave vehicle operator. I can tell you for certain that about 95% of my Wave rides are on time calls because they are based around people's medical appointments that they are being paid for with medical insurance. So those are completely eliminated from the information that the task force gathered. And I strongly suggest maybe somebody with a little bit more information about the taxi industry be included in the task force, because they don't really seem to understand how it works. Also, again, people have already mentioned that when rides aren't available, they're not considering the amount of time that somebody would hypothetically be waiting if they needed to get somewhere and they had no other option, especially if taxi companies are put out of business. And in addition to that, I think that the enforcement of TNCs should be absorbed by the TNCs. I don't think that that should be passed on to customers, as cab companies have been paying the $600 per year for that enforcement. And also, I would like to personally tell you that my income has gone down 30 to 50%. I haven't barely kept track of it. I don't really want to do my taxes because I can't really give that money up. I've postponed my school for a year. I'm unable to study. I have to work 50 hours a week to barely get by. And I'm a single, very employable young woman with very little responsibility, and I can't imagine the people who have families or mortgages or homes. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Dan Varon, and I'm the owner of Cab 82, and I work in downtown. So I have information. I actually see what goes on. Well, one of my first questions is, why do so many Uber cabs have out-of-state license plates? 70% of them have out-of-state license plates. Are they paying Oregon State income tax? Does anybody know that? My second question is, Uber has drivers that used to be cab drivers, used to be our town car drivers now. They got a swiper, so they either do Uber or they do their own account. It just depends on what they feel like doing. Most of the time, they're smart guys. They watch the surge rates. They're way better than the newbies from Uber. They're actually taxi cab drivers. They know every dorm, and they know every general manager of every hotel. You don't think they don't get the orders first? And you think they put that on Uber? I think not. And all of us have multiple contacts, right? So we get our own orders. Do you think they put those on Uber when you have your own slider? When you have 3 credit card machines plus Uber, so you just take whatever's best. So everybody's taking the cream of the crop rides, and we're still taking Central City Concern and all of the city accounts and hiring and taking the wheelchair people, parking in places where there's no parking, where the enforcement people give us tickets. Of course, we write those off our income tax because it's a write-off, right? It's a business expense. And so that's what's really happened. And another thing I've noticed, it seems like all the Uber drivers that pick up the people at the hotels, 4 or 5 of them in a row, every person is a white person, and every person that picks them up is a white person. What's going on? You get to pick the person between the 2 of them. They both decide. So what's going on? I don't know. You might look into it. I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay,
Next.
take the next.
The next 3 are Vivian, I'm sorry, yes. Yep, sorry. Tim Weller, Tony Seymour, and Dan Atkins. And they will be followed by Christian Lyons, Blake Carson, and Bill Martin.
Hey, welcome. Go ahead.
My name's Tim Weller, and I've been driving a radio cab for about 7 years. And, you know, well, the first thing that comes to my mind with regard to Uber is that, you know, this is a business that's completely conducted via smartphone. Last time I checked, it was illegal to be driving and talking on the phone. Now, we're not only asking people to talk on the phone while they're driving. We're asking them to conduct an entire business. They cannot let those calls go. My smartphone's in the car. I don't answer it until I've stopped. I don't like talking on the phone in the car. I think it's dangerous. And we're not only, these Uber drivers, as far as I'm concerned, are conducting a whole entire business on that phone. So if you, as a consumer, want to ride from Uber, well, you call them on your smartphone. You can't call them any other way. They don't take regular calls. You can't go see them or anything else, okay? And then right after you order your taxi, you give them all your credit card information, okay? After that, you have to click on a waiver, and the waiver says that if anything bad happens, Uber's not responsible, okay? I don't know about you, but why would anyone do that? Why would anyone click on a waiver like that? So your choice, commissioners, as consumers, or as you can call us up at Radio Cab or one of the other local companies and order a local cab from a local company, or you can call up on your smartphone and order it from a multinational corporation. Okay. I want to also, just yesterday, I finished my defensive driving course, which is one of the things that's required of me as a radio cab driver. Now, it's one of the many things that's required of me as a radio cab driver that doesn't apply to Uber or Lyft or the ride-sharing companies.
Okay, I need you to finish up.
Okay. And I'm going to tell you, last of all here, how this has affected me personally. I've lost about 30% of my business. And I have one little house in Portland I'm trying my best to hold on to. I'm behind on the mortgage, and I'm considering currently a Chapter 13. I want to thank Commissioner Fritz and Commissioner Fish for standing with us, standing with the local companies, and that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Dan Atkins. I am actually a driver with Uber. I'd like to thank you, Commissioner Novick, Commissioner Fritz, and yourself, Mayor Hales. You've all said, some very important things today, and I've heard both sides of the argument. I came here incredibly open-minded, and I've heard a lot of talk about innovation. I've heard a lot of talk about being very progressive, about helping people, about freedom. And earlier today at a meeting you had downstairs, I heard about the city of opportunity. And I know after hearing both sides, there are clearly big issues about the insurance policies that are going on and about the caps on different car services that exist. And these are real issues, and I can't really provide a solid answer for that. There's a lot of data that clearly needs to be looked at and evaluated. But what I haven't heard people talking about are the passengers. Who these cab companies and who Uber and Lyft and all these other TNCs, who we are actually serving in our jobs. And these are people who want to use taxis, who want to use Uber, no one is forcing anybody to use these services. And I believe that these services should exist. And I believe that everybody can coexist and these services can exist together with the correct regulations. And I don't believe that either company should have to pay expensive permits when Uber is maybe paying whatever it equals out to be. Clearly, this is a trial period, and there aren't set standards, and Uber is brand new to Portland. And I've just heard a lot of people here talking from emotion without reason. I've heard a lot of people here talking with misinformation and false information. And I just think that through what the committee showed with solid percentages, I think that was an incredible step forward. And I want you guys to continue doing this very fairly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Hey, was there a Tony Seymour? The next three will go with Christian Lyons, Blake Carson, and Bill Martin. And they'll be followed by Bruce Wilson, Chris McClenahan, and Daniel Wyman.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Bill Martin. I'm a professional driver here in Portland. I grew up here in the 60s. And in the 60s, we had Broadway and Radio Cab. Both companies were extremely professional. Their cars were impeccably clean. Their drivers wore uniforms with long sleeve shirts, ties, caps with shiny bills on them, and they were respected. Somewhere in the 70s, they all turned into a bunch of slobs. Their cars reek of fast food chains, cigarette smoke, foul body odor, and human vomit, and then they wonder why no one wants to ride with them. I've been driving limousine in this town since I was 19 years old. I was on the ground floor of town car service here, and the taxi industry threw a pity party saying the town cars were taking their business and wanted the city council to do something about it. That was their wake-up call to step up their game. Had they kept the values they had in the 60s, they wouldn't have to worry about competition today. I've been driving limousine many New Year's Eves, and on New Year's Eve, people are stranded all over Portland. They can't get a cab anywhere. They've been waiting for hours. One time, a person offered me $800 if I could take them home because they've been waiting for a cab for 4 hours. The cabs, that's the one night that they drove people home for free if they were going home. Now, they didn't want to do that. They all go into hiding. You didn't see them driving around downtown Portland, and people were stranded all over the place. They didn't care about paying. They just want to get home. So, the limo industry or the town car industry, we didn't take anything from them. They opened this door of opportunity. And I've been driving for Uber, and the customers that I get on board, I've many from all over the country say they will never call a cab again. They love the star rating system. You get clean cars, you get professional drivers, and as far as putting more cars on the road, somebody said that Uber's putting more cars. They're not putting more cars on the road. These are people that have cars that are going somewhere anyway. Turn on the app, they might get a ride, they might not, who cares? It's just extra income. It's nothing you're going to make a living at. I mean, nobody is driving Uber or Lyft to make a living. That just subsidizes what they already have. It's enough money to pay for the maintenance on your car, keep gassing it, and buy you something to eat. That's it. So it just subsidizes your income. But it's time for change. And just like I noticed that every cab driver here has a cell phone. Well, the payphone industry was a huge business at one time. Everybody that owned payphones and phone booths made a lot of money from that. You didn't think nothing of that. They all went out of business because cell phones offered something better. And it's now time for a change. If the cab's got to go out of business because something better has come along, then my advice to the good cab drivers that are out there is go home, take a bath, wash your car, and join Uber. Thank you.
Welcome. Go ahead.
My name's Christian Lyons. I'm a radio cab driver. I'm generally proud to represent our city and support its growth and development. The City Council's recognition of TNCs, however, has got it all wrong. For years, the city has maintained a cap on taxi permits and only recently began addressing the increased demand by issuing new licenses. Now suddenly, and in response to exhaustive lobbying efforts by Uber, the council has drastically changed course and deregulated the entire industry. While these TNCs may be brilliant at technology and highly effective at marketing, they are still transportation companies. Their profits are derived by providing transportation services. The smoke and mirrors of third-party contractors and the waiver of liability that riders must agree to does not change the fact that customers pay drivers under the banner of a company name. If a rider has a problem with the service they receive, they would go to the company to resolve it. If you want to work as a driver, you would apply at the company and must follow their policies and procedures. Market it however you like. TNCs function exactly like a taxi company and should be governed by the same rules as a taxi company. The lengths they have gone to circumvent regulations, protect themselves from liability, and extract revenue from the taxi industry in cities all over the world is astounding. It is a blatant attempt to reap all the rewards with none of the risk and must be rejected. Uber spends more on lawyers and lobbyists than actually operating their business, so much that they have an accumulated loss of $160 million to date. Gawker.com, cited on August 15, 2015. It would have been a much simpler, more ethical, and ultimately more sustainable proposition to partner with the industry, sell their services as a technology platform, and help move the industry into a digital age, rather than to tear it down and wreak havoc on the lives of hardworking taxpayers. To CEOs like Travis Kalanick, it's just a numbers game. Can they buy enough market share to eventually show a profit? For me, it's whether I can make next month's rent payment. Please say no to TNCs. Thank you for your consideration and time.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Is there a Blake Carson? Blake Carson? Okay, the next three are Bruce Wilson, Chris McClenahan, and Daniel Wyman.
Why don't you go ahead and call.
Thank you. I'm Bruce Wilson, and I drive for Uber and Lyft. I want to say that the people that are least represented in this meeting are the maybe 800 to 1,000 people I've had in my car. And I don't have a passenger app, and I've never driven in a cab. So I can't really speak for that experience, but I can tell you that since I've been driving, it's amazing what I hear from my passengers. And my passengers, just to give you a demographics, about 2/3 of them are from out of town. That is, people coming here to put money in our coffers, whether it's conferences, whether it's conventions, or whether it's, especially in the summer, vacationers. About 1/3 are Portland residents. And I started driving Uber. I get in the car, I start driving, how are you doing? And people start in. I love Uber. I think Uber is the greatest thing that ever happened. I hear quotes like, I could not live my life without Uber. It sounds over the top. I go, what is that? He says, well, I'm a techie. He says, I work here part of the time. I work in Silicon Valley part of the time. My girlfriend lives in San Francisco. I use Uber to make my life work. I've sold my car. I hear, I take a lady and her husband from Northeast out to PDX yesterday. They're going on the way out to see their kid in Pennsylvania in the World Series Little League. What do they say to me? She says, Uber is magical. I'm not soliciting these comments. I'm hearing this all the time. And so my main thing I wanted to say is this. When they hear that this city is still deliberating on the subject of Uber, they're incredulous. Why? Because this delay, this continued lack of backing of Uber goes directly against our branding. They go, Portland? I would have thought Portland would be the first to take Uber. Now, I had 4 Saudi Arabian kids in my car last night. They use Uber in Paris. They use Uber in New York. And they come to Portland. They don't even know how to dial a cab. They got an Uber app. It's the wave of the future. Do I like the guy who owns Uber? Don't get me going. Do I like the guy who runs Dish? Don't get me going. You know, but this is, you know, what are you going to do? There's a bell curve of technology. 10 years from now, not one of the drivers in this room has a job. Because customers will refuse to get in a car that has a steering wheel. and a fallible human being behind it. And that's the future. Read up. They say 20 years, but the tech curve is about half. So what are we talking about? We got to follow our branding, and I'll say it for Airbnb too. I take people to yurts in the backyards of North Portland houses, and they love it. They say, well, it's a little more uncomfortable than I thought it would be, but it's the only way I could come to Portland.
Thank you.
So that's what I had to say.
Thank you
all
very
very
much.
much.
Thank you.
Unless there was a Chris McClenahan, Daniel Wyman, or Valerie Bryan, come on up. Otherwise, we're going with Kat Wilkes, James Parton, Chris McKinney, Benjamin Schroeder.
Okay, got a couple. Come on up.
If I called your name, come on up.
Stand by, and we'll get you in the next group if we had called 4 people. Go ahead, please.
I'm Chris McKinney. I drive with Uber, and I haven't been, this is my first council meeting I've been to, and heard a lot of information as far as the 3 requirements, as far as the insurance. We have it 1, 2, and 3, and $50,000 on one seems a little bit low to me. Maybe we could look into that. I'm not sure insurance, how that works, as far as what the average cost would be if you hit a pedestrian, or, you know, is it $50,000? Is it $1 million? I don't know. Secondly, 24-hour coverage, 7 days a week. Currently, I have a full-time job, and I can't work more than 10 hours a week. And a lot of us are in that situation. We work very part-time. One of the main reasons I work part-time at this is because I don't have any guarantees that if I quit my job and do this full-time, that I'll have, in 3 months from now, it won't be here, and I'll have no job, period. So it's just a part-time job. As far as the caps on coverage, you can't have 24/7 coverage with letting people pick their own hours. You have to have a lot of people to make it coverage, make it work. And I think we're still growing in that field, and it'll work out. I just really enjoy having the opportunity to make some extra cash and make my life a little bit easier. That's all.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Evening.
Hi, I'm James Parton. Thanks to the council for allowing us to come and voice our opportunity to tell our stories. I'm a veteran from Vietnam era. I've got many health problems. So I found Uber the answer to a problem I had of getting up to the VA for my health appointments and trying to hold a job at the same time. These opportunities are few and far between in the work market nowadays. I make a good hourly wage. I've been a business owner over the years, and I know how to do a budget. I've budgeted out everything, and I'm saving for taxes when they come 1099 in January. The money's there to be made. The demand is there for everyone. We need to have the tourists that love Uber a chance to use it. They've all, like the man a few minutes ago, they just adore this service. And it would be a blight on this community to turn back the page, and I think we need to move forward. I think the modern system is coming to Portland. It's just a need to figure out how. I, for one, would be pleased to pay $600 a year for the right to operate my business here in Portland, just like the cabs do. So I hope that you impose the same fees on us that you do the cabs. We're not trying to avoid fees. We would be pleased to pay the fees in order to be able to operate our businesses. So I also wanted to mention that you talk about, you know, Social Security and workman's comp. Are you going to apply those to all contract employees? All the guys out there working, remodeling homes, building homes, are you going to move that to those contract employees? Why are you only concerned about the transportation contract employees? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Evening.
Hello, my name is Ben Schroeder. I've been a cab driver for 11 years, and I appreciated what you guys were saying about putting commercial insurance as the main thing. Making that a suggestion, that's a good thing. Just cover everybody all the time in those cars. That way, all the bases are covered. That expense and then the permitting thing, like you just said, would put things in a balanced position. And then I'm pretty sure that all of the Uber drivers will probably come to the realization that they're actually not making any money because Uber's taking too big of a cut. Uber is a scam for the drivers. It is. So eventually they'll fall off. They won't be drivers any longer. Like Darren Campbell said earlier, they'll quit after about 6 months or a year. They'll be done. But then there will be a bunch of inexperienced drivers stepping in to do it. I'm just hoping that the general public starts to realize that these drivers they're de-incentivized to actually get the insurance and maintain their cars. We're going to end up with a bunch of smoking vehicles unless you do maintenance requirements. Okay, so at Radio Cab, we have lease drivers that drive the cars. Every single lease driver that drives a car is another set of ears to audit that vehicle for its mechanical soundness. And we write it up on a board, and it goes to the garage that day. A personal driver is going to drive their car until it doesn't go anymore, a lot of times. So oil changes lead to smoking cars. If you don't change your oil, you wear out the engine, and it starts to smoke. These are expenses that go into the cost. My cost is already put in when I pay my lease and pay for my gas, and it's covered. The car is always maintained and always insured. And if you really want to make money as a driver, you should drive for a company that models itself like Radio Cab does. It's a good business model. You should check out how the numbers work. You would probably be pleased.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Was there Valerie Bryan or Kat Wilkes?
I think we can take about 3 or 4 more people before we have to let the council deliberate and vote, because we're going to lose a quorum at 5:45.
Okay, then we'll go with Michael Miller.
Okay. So let's make this the last group, and apologies to those
Jan
that haven't
Arthur
been able to
Weston.
testify. I know, we haven't heard from everyone, but we're going to have to at least accept the report. I think I've got some suggestions for further action, but let's hear from these folks and then let us deliberate about the report itself. So go ahead, sir, please.
My name is Michael Miller. I only have 2 minutes, so I'll thank you afterwards.
Don't bother, go ahead.
I've been working for Uber, or working with Uber for the past month, and it's been a lot of fun. I love that I can log on and off as I please. I set my own schedule. So far, all of my riders have expressed a love for Uber, emphasizing the application's ability to show them my GPS location, approximate time of arrival, and a real-time interactive map showing my progress to pick them up. This means that they can remain seated at dinner, finish that bite of dessert, and more importantly, that they reduce the amount of time that they need to stand at a curb waiting for a ride. Most of my riders have been from out of town and mentioned that they have Uber in their hometowns. They express relief that they could use Uber here in Portland. Some have communicated frustration over past visits to Portland and efforts to get a ride prior to Uber's arrival. I've had visitors from New York speak about Uber Taxi, a service that levels the playing field for current taxi drivers, allowing them to utilize the Uber application, hailing the closest available cab, showing them on the map. It even allows taxi driver and passengers to rate each other. Sometimes riders are silent the entire ride with headphones on and will suddenly address the business meeting they're in with a clear, attentive voice about some business deal or another, only to nod and wave as they leave the car with a smile. Uber removes much of the frustration of traveling around town. When a customer reaches their destination, they can simply leave. There's no need to shuffle through a purse or a wallet or discuss the fee for the ride because it's all done through the application. I've asked many riders what they would have done today if Uber wasn't around. A large majority of them said that they would have likely risked driving themselves to that dinner with friends or night out on the town. I believe that Uber has created a niche for itself, is generating new business, the kind of business that helps keep people safe and will likely reduce the number of impaired drivers. I'm proud to be a part of Uber.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Good evening.
Hi, I'm Kat Wilkes. I've been associated with Radio Cab for 25-plus years. I've also sat on the Private for Hire board. I'm also a defensive driving instructor at Radio Cab Company. And I have prepared this speech that's going to last a half hour. But now I see that everybody said what I really wanted to say. So I just have a few highlights, and I won't be long. Just basically, you know, attending all those meetings for all those years, you know, it's drummed into our heads over and over and over about public safety. And when I listen to some of the stuff that, you know, people want to let go, I'm just kind of appalled. My mouth is hanging open. One thing would be the insurance. I mean, our families and our friends are the riders. We want everybody to be safe. We want the public to be safe. So the insurance is really a very, very important thing. And, you know, as far as, you know, making more code rules, it would be really great if could include a TNC representative and a taxi representative. Because I don't think that there's anybody on that committee that is a taxi driver or a manager for a taxi company. And, you know, you have people with tons of knowledge that can be very helpful. And, you know, taxi drivers, taxi companies are not always wrong. And I just want to say that it would be, you know, it seems sensible. Also, when you talk about the big monopoly of the taxi companies, actually that was created by the city. So we don't have like some big old secret that we're keeping. But anyway, that's it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Jan Weston here. I've been a registered voter in Portland since 1961. I call you folks my city council. Proud of you. I've been semi-retired for 12 years. Social Security, poverty level stuff. It's not enough to live on. So I work, and I work hard. I keep off the public dole. But I don't work so much that I can't volunteer in many places also. It's part of payment to society. So if you folks want to assess a $600 or whatever fee, I'll pay it willingly. This part-time job is the best job I've ever had. And work when I want to. That works well for me. I'm not going to talk about everything on my list because I don't want the criticism from this unruly audience. So I'll just hit a couple of high spots. One, how about having an indicator that a ride is child safety equipped? There's other indicators for a bike rack and for a foldable wheelchair and, of course, power chairs. So seems like a simple thing to do. If the cabs need to have cameras for safety, then it seems like the rest ought to have cameras for safety also. Such a small investment nowadays in that technology. And I don't hear any discussion on drug and alcohol testing that is so. I have 2 other part-time jobs in the automotive industry where I'm subject to random testing. And there are so many people who fail. How can those people submit themselves to the test? Why don't they just quit instead of having it on their record? But drug and alcohol testing looks like a big part of people that are going to be out on the street, public safety. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Mr. Weston, Jen, could you please submit the rest of your comments in writing? Because I thought those were very helpful suggestions.
Very
Thank you.
And let me also ask anyone else who hasn't gotten to speak, and again, our apologies for not being able to hear everyone, at least this afternoon. But if you haven't had a chance to speak, we hope you do email or write to us. We should take up the question of now whether we want to accept the report today or not. And then also what instructions we want to give to our volunteers on this committee, if we can ask them to do some more things. I know I have some issues I want them to look at in greater depth based on what I've heard here today. So Commissioner Fritz, your thoughts?
Well, I was just going to follow up and say that usually when we don't get to everybody's testimony, yes, we'd certainly like you to send it in writing, but then we call the people who signed up and didn't get to testify. You get to testify first the next time. So there's that. It's not until October, but
What's not till October? I'm
the
sorry.
next time to testify. Are you going to continue the hearing?
Well, I don't know. That's one of the options. Again, all that's before us today is accepting the report. So I would be inclined to accept the report, but I think there's a lot of public input that we still need to get, so I want to be sensitive to that. Steve, your thoughts, Commissioner?
I actually don't know if there's any procedure we might have to have the people who signed up today testify at a separate proceeding later, but if Carla tells us that that's something that we might be able to do.
We've done that in the past.
Okay, I think that might be the best thing to do. When would we be able to do that?
You want to do it?
Well,
We've resolved it. What difference would that make?
Well, I've got people here who've been right up to and including the last people to testify. I've been writing notes of issues that I'd like further information on. Doesn't mean we can't accept the report. Those are separate questions. From the report is from the citizen task force to us. We're also getting testimony from the community. It will shape what we do at the end of this next period. So I guess I will want to make sure we've got an opportunity for the community to be heard, but I also want to at some point say, thank you, task force. We appreciate your report. We'll take it. So those are separate matters, but on the same subject. One is we've got a task force who's done their work and given us a report. We also have folks in the community that have thoughts on the same subject and are trying to express them.
Mayor, my question is, I'm not sure at this point exactly when we will know will be the next time we take up this issue, and it'd be appropriate to hear from the people who signed up today.
Well, what I would suggest, though, I'm very glad to hear, Mayor, that you are willing to consider further direction to the task force. I would suggest that we continue the hearing, give people who signed up and didn't get to testify a chance to speak, and that way our fellow commissioners who had to leave today would be able
that's
to
the
weigh
other issue.
in. I think that that's really important. That
I'd like to give them an opportunity to hear the rest of the record today and also take in. So let's do this. Let's continue this item. We'll get to the question in a moment of when we're going to continue it to. Give people a chance to provide comments in writing in the meantime and allow those who've signed up today to speak. So again, our apologies that you're not going to get to speak today, but if you're signed up, we'll give you that opportunity with, again, our other two colleagues back here able to participate. That could be as soon as next week, depending on what the council calendar looks like next week.
Wednesday afternoon at 2 is available.
Okay, so let's do that. If that's acceptable to Commissioner Novick, then I'd say that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to continue this hearing to Wednesday at 2 p.m., provide anyone who signed up the opportunity to come speak then. So we do want to respect your ability to have your say here. And again, our apologies that we haven't gotten it in during this first portion of the hearing. In the meantime, I want to ask all members of the council, and I'll hold myself to this as well, to start documenting what we want further reviewed by either the Bureau or by the task force. I've got some issues, this insurance issue, for example. I have a number of questions. So let's have council members make sure we transmit our questions to Commissioner Novick and Director Treat. And in some cases, they can be addressed by staff because they're simply technical questions. In other cases, we may need further assistance from the task force, and I think we'll probably be able to sort that all out next week. Does that sound like a plan? Again, I want to thank everyone for your participation today. We'll be back on this subject next Wednesday at 2 p.m., and we are adjourned for the week. Thank you very much.